Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Lizzi Marriott. Lizzi Marriott, a 19-year-old college student, went missing on October 9, 2012, after attending her classes. Before leaving, she left a note for her aunt and uncle, Tony and Becky Hannah, with whom she was staying. In the note, Lizzi said she was visiting a friend and would return before midnight. However, she did not return that night or the next day. Her car was later found in the school parking lot, but she was nowhere to be found. The investigation into her disappearance eventually turned to the search for her body. Police discovered that a group of people were involved in her death. Lizzi became a favorite member of Tony and Becky's family, moving in with them to save on housing costs while she attended the University of New Hampshire. She has always had a passion for marine animals, which inspired her to pursue a career in marine biology. In the fall of 2012, Lizzi moved away from her parents, Bob and Melissa Marriott, in Massachusetts to start a new life in Chester. Despite the 2-hour drive, they remained close and kept in touch. Lizzi's gentle, kind, and sweet nature made her a lovable person, and her presence brought joy to those around her. Tony and Becky remember her warm greeting, "I'm home," which filled their hearts with love and happiness whenever she returned to their home. As Lizzi settled into her new life, she worked at Target in her spare time, where she quickly adapted and built a good reputation. Lizzi met 18-year-old Kate McDonald, and the two quickly became friends, often hanging out after work. One evening, Kate invites Lizzi to her apartment for dinner and a movie. Lizzi agrees. However, their plans for a quiet evening are disrupted when Kate's 30-year-old boyfriend, Seth Mazzaglia, joins them. Lizzi doesn't mind Seth's surprise appearance, thinking it would be more fun to have a friend. Moreover, her new acquaintances are interesting people related to the theater. And Seth graduated from the same university as Lizzi but majored in theater arts. With many of the same interests, the evening looks like it will be a lot of fun. However, Lizzi doesn't know that her decision to enter the apartment that night will be a fateful one, as she will never leave again. Lizzi's relatives wait until the next evening, thinking that she may have stayed overnight with a friend before going to college. However, when she did not appear on October 10th, her aunt and uncle became worried and contacted her parents. But her parents had no information about her whereabouts. After receiving the news, Lizzi's mother and father immediately drove to Chester, reporting her missing to the police along the way. The search for Lizzi involved not only the police and her relatives, but also her friends. To begin the investigation, everyone who knew her was questioned. Although her relatives were unsure of her whereabouts, her friends were able to provide some information. A friend named Nate Michael said he knew where she might be and pointed to Kate McDonald. The police took note of this and began to follow up on new leads. Meanwhile, it was discovered that there was no activity on Lizzi's bank account and her phone was turned off. This ruled out the initial possibility that she had been in an accident. The investigation took a significant turn when her car was found just a few days later. At the same time, Bob and Melissa Marriott announced a $10,000 reward for information about their missing daughter. After speaking with Lizzi's friends and acquaintances, the police discovered some surprising details about Lizzi's coworker, Kate, and her boyfriend Seth Mazzaglia. It was clear that the couple was not what they appeared to be in public. Seth was later arrested. Lizzi and Kate's acquaintances revealed that the two girls had been spending a lot of time together recently, but their personalities and attitudes towards life seemed different. Lizzi was known to be friendly and compassionate, while Kate was often described as reserved and rude. However, employees at the store noticed a change in Kate's behavior after she started dating Seth, suggesting that she had been influenced by his bad traits over time. She had undergone significant changes, losing her previous carefree and bubbly personality. Unbeknownst to them, she had also begun to distance herself from relatives who disapproved of her new boyfriend. The couple began dating when Seth was 17, and after she turned 18, they moved in together at Mel's apartment in Dover, New Hampshire. Police kept a close eye on the couple and conducted background checks but found nothing unusual. While studying the young couple's online profiles, officers discovered details about their personal lives. Seth and Kate had an unusual relationship. On a website, Kate, using the pseudonym Miss Scarlet, a vampire actress, posted an ad. She wrote that she and her partner were looking for a live-in maid. Required duties included cleaning the house, washing dishes, laundry, cooking, and being available for sex at any time. Kate also shared information about herself and her partner, describing their relationship as dominant and submissive, with the former giving orders and controlling while the latter completely submitted to his will. Kate had attached photos of herself in a Gothic style to the post. It was clear that their relationship was not based on love and mutual respect, but on humiliation and submission. The couple practiced a form of bondage, discipline, dominance, and submission, with Seth as the dominant partner and Kate as the submissive. This discovery led the police to strongly suspect that they might be involved in Lizzi's disappearance. On October 12, the police interviewed Kate and Seth. The police separated them to gather information more effectively. For 2 hours, Kate insisted that she had not seen Lizzi on October 9th. Then she refused to talk altogether. Seth, on the other hand, provided more details, confirming that Lizzi had been at their house that day. According to Seth, the evening involved watching movies, playing strip poker, and then having consensual sex with 2 women. During this intimate encounter, Seth claimed that he had tied the women up with rope, but the situation turned tragic, resulting in Lizzi's accidental death. Then, in a state of shock and fear of being misunderstood, he and Kate took the girl's body to Pierce Island and threw it into the Piscataqua River. They then went home. After an 11-hour interrogation, Seth took police to the location where he said he dumped Lizzi's body, reenacting the scene where he threw her off the cliff. He was later charged with murder on October 13th. The news of their daughter's death was devastating to Melissa and Bob Marriott. A candlelight vigil was held in Lizzi's memory that same day. At the vigil, Bob expressed his gratitude to those in attendance and hoped that the collective prayer would bring Lizzi peace. He described his daughter as an angel who had gone to heaven. Her friend Nate, who was actively involved in the search for Lizzi, remembered her as always telling funny stories to lift the spirits or comfort others during difficult times. He sadly wondered if she would ever find the right words to comfort them in her current situation. However, Lizzi's parents refused to accept the circumstances of her death as Seth described. Her parents asked the police to find their daughter's body as soon as possible so they could say goodbye and give her a proper burial. The search for Lizzi continued, with the cooperation of volunteers and police. However, the river where Lizzi's body was dumped was subject to strong currents, and it is likely that she had drifted into the Atlantic Ocean. The investigation expanded to include a thorough search of Seth and Kate's apartment and the surrounding area. Police found that their apartment was unclean and very messy. They also discovered that Seth had an interest in occultism and black magic. Since no evidence was found in the apartment, forensic experts examined the surrounding area, including the trash cans. In one of the bins, they found a bag containing a sweatshirt, black leather gloves, and men's underwear. After an autopsy, underwear was found to contain DNA from both Seth and Lizzi, confirming their intimate relationship. Police also found a sweater that was identified by Lizzi's family as hers. On October 17th, Kate gave her statement after a period of silence. She described a get-together with Lizzi on October 9th. The evening began as a movie night but then turned into a game of strip poker. During the game, they became excited and decided to have sex, with all parties allegedly consenting. According to Kate, The interactions began with affectionate touches and kisses before Seth suggested tying Lizzi up with rope, an idea she agreed to. Kate even reenacted Seth tying Lizzi up with rope. Everything was going well, but suddenly Lizzi had a seizure. She began having difficulty breathing, and a few minutes later, she passed out. When Seth and Kate lifted the girl up, she stopped breathing. It all happened quickly and unexpectedly. Kate claimed that no one was responsible for what happened, it was an accident. However, a crucial testimony later emerged, shedding further light on the case. One day, a young woman came to the police station, claiming that she had important information about the Lizzi Marriott case. She asked to speak to the police officer leading the investigation. During the conversation, the woman introduced herself as Catherine Fish, Seth's ex-girlfriend. As she shared her story, she hinted that Seth was capable of murder. She revealed that, during their relationship, he had once confessed to her that in one of his fantasies, he had taken someone's life. Catherine and Seth met about 10 years ago. Initially, Seth appeared to be a charming and attentive man, showering Catherine with attention, flowers, and gifts. He was charming in conversation, and Catherine quickly fell in love with him. However, things took an unexpected turn during their first intimate encounter, when Catherine discovered that Seth enjoyed physical violence. Although Catherine was initially willing to explore new experiences as long as Seth remained in control, she soon became uncomfortable as Seth's behavior became increasingly cruel and aggressive. Seth would occasionally share his disturbing thoughts and fantasies with Catherine, which only made her increasingly anxious. One particularly unpleasant conversation led Catherine to a terrifying realization: Seth could be a danger to her. This fear was soon confirmed when Seth, in a fit of aggression, grabbed Catherine by the neck, squeezing despite her desperate pleas to let go. Catherine's life became increasingly uncomfortable after her boyfriend, Seth, brought home several different girls, claiming that they needed a third, long-term partner to spice up their relationship. Catherine's life became hell. She admitted that Seth scared her so much that she didn't dare to escape. After a few months, she finally got the courage to run away. Catherine miraculously traveled 1,000 miles to her parents' house, never to see her ex-boyfriend again. In May 2014, Seth appeared in court on charges including attempted murder. Several witnesses testified against him, including Kate McDonald, who was arrested 2 months after Lizzi's death on charges of obstruction of justice and obstruction of justice. While in custody, Kate had plenty of time to reflect on her actions and the person she was protecting. Initially, she and Seth maintained an active correspondence while she was behind bars. The pair shared romantic visions of escaping together and fleeing to a country without extradition laws where they could marry and start a family. However, their escape plan hit a snag. Seth convinced his soon-to-be-released cellmate, Ryan Bachman, to assist in the plan. Ryan was given access to Seth's bank account and instructed to withdraw money, buy drugs with the money, and then sell the drugs to increase his initial capital. The plan was to use the extra money to buy various items, including guns, 2 cars, explosives, and a boat. However, Ryan decided to use the money for his own purposes, and the police soon discovered the plan. Seth therefore abandoned his escape plan and sent Kate a letter, suggesting that they would meet in the afterlife, hinting at the possibility that death was not the end of life. Some interpreted this as a suggestion for Kate to end her life. Over time, Kate's thinking became clearer, and when the prosecutor's office offered her a favorable deal in 2014, she accepted without hesitation. The deal required Kate to give a truthful account of the events that occurred on the evening of October 9th in the apartment. In return, her potential 20-year prison sentence was reduced to 3 years. Kate said that after she started a relationship with Seth, she was terrified of him and did everything he told her to do. Over time, Seth took control of her life, suppressed her free will, and made her dependent on him. A month and a half before Lizzi's death, Seth sent her a text message, asking her to find another partner as soon as possible because he didn't want to be alone while she was away on a 10-day theatrical tour. However, Kate was unable to find anyone to replace her. Over time, Seth's messages became more aggressive, shifting from commands to threats. He warned her that if she didn't follow his instructions, she would face serious consequences. At the very least, Seth wanted her to bring a friend to spend time with so he could pursue his plans. To fulfill his request, Kate invites her friend Lizzi, as Lizzi has been to Kate's house before and trusts her. Lizzi is unaware that Seth planned this and is happy that she is the chosen partner, as he has seen her pictures before. To ensure that Lizzi will come without hesitation, Kate does not tell her that they will have Seth join them. Lizzi arrives at Kate's apartment on October 9th at 9 p.m. Initially, Kate and Lizzi socialize while Seth joins in later, creating a lively atmosphere with his jokes and interest in the girls. When they move on to watch a movie, Seth suggests a strip card game, which adds an intimate atmosphere to the scene. The game goes normally, but Lizzi is losing, so she strips in her underwear for another losing game. Seth suggested kissing Lizzi, but the girl refused, explaining that she had a boyfriend and that disgusted her. After a while, Seth asked Lizzi to be alone, and she replied no. In response, Seth angrily left the room, put on a pair of black leather gloves, and grabbed a rope. He then returned, sat down behind Lizzi, and quickly wrapped the rope around her neck. Lizzi was taken by surprise and had no time to react. Seth had strangled her without hesitation. He then desecrated the victim's body. During the whole process, Kate sat nearby, frozen in fear. She was afraid that she would be the next victim, so she did nothing to help poor Lizzi. Around 1 a.m., the couple put Lizzi's body in a suitcase after wrapping it in a tarp and some pollen. They transported the suitcase to Lizzi's car and drove to Pierce Island, which was located by the river. Once on the island, they took the suitcase to an observation deck and took the body out, throwing it over the cliff. After dumping the body, the couple cleaned up in the car, then drove to the school and left Lizzi's car in the parking lot. From there, they walked about 10 miles home. Kate later explained that she was very scared and shocked during the whole process. She later refused to testify against Seth because she was afraid he would hurt her. During the trial, the girl appeared to be in pain, crying continuously, but not shedding a single tear. Because of this, many in the courtroom doubted her sincerity. They believed that she might be a talented actress and that she could easily fake her pain. The defense took note of this and argued that the girl's emotional display was fabricated. Meanwhile, both the defense and the prosecution agreed that the couple disposed of Lizzi's body after she died. However, they disagreed on the circumstances surrounding the death. Seth's defense argued that the victim, Lizzi, died as a result of an accident during an intimate encounter. Kate's defense, on the other hand, claimed that the death was intentional, and asserted that Kate had been under great pressure from Seth, who isolated her from her family and friends and forced her into intimate relationships. This, according to the defense, had a significant impact on her mental state. The prosecution, on the other hand, focused on proving that the crime was an act of intentional homicide. They presented the discovery of the gloves as crucial evidence, which they alleged showed that Seth had tried to cover his tracks. According to the prosecution, Seth was aware of what he had done. The prosecution's witnesses also included Roberta Gherkin and Paul Hickok, acquaintances of the couple. It turned out that at 10:49 p.m., after Lizzi's death, Seth called them. He said he needed help and asked them to come. After 11 p.m., the couple went to Seth's apartment, where they witnessed a disturbing scene, Seth sitting on the bed next to a girl in lingerie. When Paul asked about the situation, Seth repeatedly said, "This time it's gone too far." Roberta discovered Kate curled up on the kitchen floor. Upon witnessing this, the couple urged Seth to call an ambulance and quickly left the scene. They chose not to intervene or contact the police to avoid any further trouble. Seth Mazzaglia, 32, was convicted of first-degree murder by strangulation and conspiracy on August 14, 2014. He was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. His co-defendant, Kate McDonald, 20, was sentenced to 3 years in prison. After her release in 2016, Kate lived a fairly private life, with many believing she had returned to her parents' home. Tragically, Lizzi Marriott's body was never found. Her parents, Bob and Melissa, created a memorial bench in their hometown to honor their daughter. While they accept that justice has been served in part through Seth's sentencing, they find it difficult to accept the leniency of Kate McDonald's sentence, claiming that their daughter will never return. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Dawn Hatcheney. Dawn Hatcheney was born on December 5, 1969, in Seattle, Washington. Her parents are Donald Tihara and Diana Parle. Her father, Donald, worked at a shipyard, and her mother, Diana, ran the household. Dawn is the oldest child and only daughter, with 3 younger brothers, Dennis, Darren, and Derek. Her family lives in Bremerton, Washington. According to her mother Diana, Dawn showed her religious devotion from an early age, embracing her faith and accepting God into her life when she was 4 years old. Dawn's childhood was difficult, however. Her parents suffered from anxiety and depression, leading to frequent conflicts at home. Despite these challenges in her childhood, Dawn did well in school, promising herself to get good grades. At age 12, she entered the Scripps National Spelling Bee, an experience that not only led her to the White House but also gave her the opportunity to meet the late President Ronald Reagan. Dawn graduated from Bremerton Christian School as valedictorian in 1988 before attending Northwest College of the Church of God in Seattle. While in college, Dawn met Nick Hatchey and they quickly formed a strong bond. However, her friends were concerned when she started calling him the one after only a few dates. They wanted Dawn to find someone who would truly care for and support her, but they worried that Nick was too aggressive and self-assured, which didn't seem to fit Dawn's personality. Interestingly, Nick's upbringing has some similarities to Dawn's. Nick was born and raised in Poulsbo, a coastal city in Washington. His family life was difficult from an early age. His father, Dan, was constantly immersed in his work as a mechanic, always distant when at home, neglecting his time and responsibilities for the family. His mother, Sandra, ran a daycare in the home and provided foster care, but Nick felt abandoned. He often confided in friends that he felt less loved than his siblings and even his foster children, and that his mother's affection for him was distasteful. Life was difficult with a depressed mother and a father who often neglected the family. Nick felt abandoned and emotionally isolated. Despite this, he found comfort in the Bible and became deeply involved in Christianity. His faith gave him confidence throughout his adolescence. Nick and Dawn first met in college. At first, Dawn's friends were confused by her interest in Nick, whose personality was the complete opposite of hers. Over time, they noticed a significant change in Dawn's behavior. Normally, she was confident, outgoing, independent, motivated, and always striving to achieve new goals. However, when she was with Nick, her personality changed dramatically. She became shy, introverted, and indecisive, often putting Nick's interests above her own, even when they made her feel uncomfortable. It seemed that Nick's influence brought out the worst in her, rather than the best. Despite this, their love continued to grow and their relationship remained strong. In 1990, Nick proposed to Dawn on Alki Beach and they became engaged. They married on April 20, 1991, and then moved back to Bremerton. By this time, both Dawn and Nick had completed their education. Dawn began working as a loan officer, and Nick began his work as a youth pastor at Christ Community Church on Bainbridge Island, near Seattle. Nick had a desire to become a youth pastor, specifically targeting Christ Community Church due to his relationship with his former youth pastor, Bob, also known as P.B. Smith. At the time, P.B. Smith remained at the church, having overseen the church's affairs since the late 1980s, but now partnered with Pastor Robert Billy Craig to lead the congregation. P.B. Smith took a more friendly but conservative approach to church leadership, while Pastor Robert was known for his strict teachings. In their marriage, Nick made decisions without his wife Dawn, largely because they adhered to the principles of Christian fundamentalism. These principles dictate that the wife submit to the authority of her husband, which Nick and Dawn believed was in line with God's plan. At Christ Community Church, this ideology was clearly promoted and considered acceptable. The church even performed exorcisms for its members, encouraged large families as a divine mandate, and advocated homeschooling for children. Modesty in women was emphasized, and questions about sexuality were taboo. Those who disagreed with these norms risked expulsion from the church, creating a climate of silence among dissenters for fear of expulsion. Dawn and her congregation are mired in what many call a cult, with her husband, Nick, playing a key role in these dangerous activities. Initially, Nick admires P.B. Smith, but he soon becomes dissatisfied with P.B. Smith's laid-back approach and feels he has not learned enough. He turns his admiration to Pastor Robert, who has a more extreme and strict approach. Nick seeks direct advice from Robert, distancing himself from his close relationship with P.B. Smith. In contrast, Pastor Robert sees Nick as an opportunity to advance his own agenda. He wants to remove P.B. Smith from his position as senior pastor and take control of the church. Robert's intentions are not sincere, and he uses Nick to achieve his own goals. Meanwhile, Nick and his wife Dawn are facing challenges in their personal lives. They are constantly moving from house to house, renovating properties to sell. Dawn grew tired of this lifestyle and longed to settle down in a permanent home. By 1997, these issues were causing tension in their relationship. Nick found a house in need of repair in East Bremerton, planning to move in, renovate, and make it their home. However, the purchase, renovation, and home business plunged the couple into debt. Although their relationship seemed perfect, with Dawn seemingly a supportive wife who agreed with Nick's plans, there were underlying issues that were not immediately apparent. At the same time, Nick was getting into more debt by frequently lending money to people in their church. Nick embarked on his ambitious project of establishing a Christian youth camp. Despite financial difficulties, his passion for the project kept him going. He searched for the perfect location in Jefferson County, confident that he would find the ideal location. His determination intensified when a congregant, a woman named Sandy Glass, asserted receiving a divine vision affirming that the property Nick had his eye on was destined to become the site of the youth camp he envisioned. Sandy Glass, then in her early 20s, had faced hardships in her life. She had lost her first boyfriend to illness and her father in a construction accident. Her brother was addicted to drugs. Sandy was married to Jimmy, a carpenter, and they were struggling financially. A stay-at-home mother, Sandy depended on Jimmy's income, but her tendency to overspend often led to arguments between them. These disagreements sometimes caused Jimmy to scream or retreat, spending hours at the bar venting his frustrations. To resolve their marital problems, the couple sought help from the church and began attending marriage counseling sessions led by Nick, who had been the church's marriage counselor for many years. However, many parishioners filed complaints with Robert about Nick's counseling style, feeling uncomfortable with the way he prioritized intimate and often sexual topics over other important issues. Because of their trust in P.B. Smith, who was still affiliated with the church, members felt that Nick would not have been entrusted with the role if he were not trustworthy. However, in the fall of 1997, Pastor Robert took over as senior pastor, a move that was fully supported by the church council, replacing P.B. Smith. P.B. Smith and his wife then left to do missionary work in Africa. Jimmy's parents, who were also churchgoers, considered Sandy and Jimmy's decision to seek church intervention to be a hasty one. They even questioned Nick's qualifications and experience in guiding their son's marriage. Their concerns grew when they noticed that Nick focused a lot of his attention on Sandy, rather than Sandy and Jimmy as a couple. This attention was not limited to counseling sessions. Nick and Sandy spent a lot of time talking on the phone and meeting outside of church. Jimmy's parents felt that the relationship between Nick and Sandy was unacceptable. They spent a lot of time together and seemed closer than a normal counselor and client should be. Pastor Robert's wife, Pamela, also noticed Nick's behavior and spoke to him privately about it. She told him that he needed to focus on his marriage and that his actions were inappropriate. After much complaining, Pastor Robert stepped in and told Sandy that her relationship with Nick was not working and needed to end. Sandy was angry with Pastor Robert's advice because she believed that she and Nick had a special relationship with God. She wrote him a letter saying that his judgment made it difficult for her to think that he believed in her ability to listen to God and help others. The relationship between Sandy and Nick had a negative impact on those around them. Dawn and Jimmy, as well as Jimmy's children from his previous marriage to Sandy, felt hurt and betrayed. One of the children even told Jimmy that Nick and Sandy had discussed Nick becoming their new father after Jimmy's death. Dawn began sharing with friends at church about her financial difficulties and her desire to have children, a desire that Nick strongly opposed. As 1997 drew to a close, Nick had relationships with several women in addition to Sandy. He engaged in private conversations and lengthy phone calls with these women. At the same time, Sandy's alleged visions grew stronger, prompting Nick to prioritize the establishment of her youth camp and devote more time to their relationship, as she believed they were destined to be together. On the contrary, Dawn made a lot of effort to rekindle Nick's happiness with her, even trying to lose weight. Some of the women in the congregation supported her, telling her that the problems in their relationship were not her fault, but Nick's own. Unfortunately, Dawn's life with Nick did not turn out as she had hoped when they got married. When Christmas came, Dawn woke up feeling unwell with a cold. Despite being sick, she and Nick spent the day with their family. That evening, they visited P.B. Smith's house and spent time with his family. Nick had plans to go hunting with Lindsay, P.B. Smith's daughter, and her friends the next morning, the 26th. Nick met his friends at the Hood Canal Bridge in Jefferson County to go hunting just before dawn. They spent a few hours in the woods without shooting anything and decided to leave. Around 9 a.m., they went to a local diner for breakfast. While eating, Nick suddenly stood up, looking worried, and said, "Dawn and I haven't opened our Christmas presents yet." He left the diner at 9:30 a.m. and arrived home at 10 a.m. to find his wife dead in a fire. When police arrived on the scene, they discovered that the fire had initially started in the bedroom, due to a malfunctioning space heater. The fire quickly spread due to newspapers and wrapping paper in the room, and was made worse by multiple propane tanks on the floor. Nick told friends at the diner that he and his family had not opened their Christmas presents. But he told police a different story. According to Nick, they had actually opened their presents the night before. He said that Dawn had gone to bed feeling unwell and left the wrapping paper scattered around. Nick also confirmed that he had received a propane tank as a Christmas present. The couple was in the process of renovating their home and had used the heater to stay warm during the winter. However, these old fireplaces were not as safe as modern ones and often caused fires and deaths. The police found no inconsistencies in Nick's story. As a local pastor, Nick's status in the community gave the police no reason to suspect anything else. And his wife's death, which was ruled an accident. The congregation was concerned for Nick's health and wanted to support him during this difficult time. Pastor Robert even offered to try to revive Dawn through prayer, but Nick refused, saying he did not want her to suffer any potential pain. This refusal surprised Robert, as Nick had previously been willing to participate in church activities, including the exorcisms they had performed. Mary Glass, Sandy's mother-in-law, immediately suspected Nick of being involved in Dawn's death. Convinced that it was no accident, she urged her husband to report the situation to the police, but this never happened. Soon after, the police officially declared Dawn's death an accident and referred the case to Nick's insurance company. Nick began the process of collecting on Dawn's life insurance, which raised some suspicions from family and friends. They thought it was unusual for Nick to settle the insurance so quickly after Dawn's death, but they understood that the couple had significant debt and that Nick needed the money to pursue his plans for the youth camp. Some church members found Nick's way of grieving unusual, but they refrained from expressing concern, believing that everyone deals with grief differently. The church community came together to remember Dawn's life at her funeral. Family and friends shared stories and remembered her life. Although everyone was sad, Nick remained calm throughout and even gave a 45-minute speech in Dawn's honor. When friends helped him clean out his house, they found several photos of Dawn hidden in the back of a closet, making it seem as though he wanted to throw them away. After that, Nick's behavior became increasingly harsh and insensitive, not only toward some church members but also toward neighbors and friends. He had many romantic relationships with women in the congregation. In a shocking turn of events, Nick began an intimate relationship with Diana, Dawn's mother, under the guise of grief over his widowhood. His actions became too much for Pastor Robert to bear, and Nick was asked to leave Christ Community Church. This eviction had a significant impact on Nick, marking the beginning of his growing troubles. On April 10, 2001, Sandy and her attorney met with the district attorney. The district attorney offered Sandy immunity in exchange for her testimony about a secret she had kept since December 26, 1997. According to Sandy, on the morning of Dawn's death, Nick called her and said, "I did it." However, their conversation was abruptly interrupted by another incoming call on Sandy's phone, leaving Nick waiting to answer the call from someone at the church who had informed him of Dawn's case. After the second call ended, Sandy returned to the conversation with Nick and asked him to clarify what he meant. Nick simply repeated, "It's over, it's over." Sandy did not ask for further details about the call for several weeks. Eventually, Sandy confronted Nick, who confessed to giving Dawn an overdose of Benadryl and then suffocating her by placing a plastic bag over her face. Tragically, Dawn was still partially conscious and aware of what her husband was doing as she suffocated. After she died, Nick carefully placed old newspapers and wrapping paper around the room, including under her body, and placed propane tanks near the bed. He then turned on the heater to burn and start the fire, in an attempt to destroy any evidence of the crime and make it look like an accident. Dawn's autopsy revealed no soot or carbon monoxide in her lungs or blood. The pathologist who examined Dawn ruled her death an accidental fire. They missed crucial evidence of carbon monoxide binding to red blood cells, suggesting that she had not been breathing during the fire. Despite having 5 times the normal amount of Benadryl in her system, the pathologist concluded that the amount was not enough to cause respiratory failure, arguing that even if Dawn had been drowsy, she would have reacted to the increased temperature. Notably, crime scene photos showed newspapers under Dawn's body, a disturbing detail that was largely overlooked. A fire marshal became suspicious and spoke to the police, but he had no authority to decide whether Dawn's death was accidental. Nick was arrested on September 12, 2001, in the Kinko's parking lot. He adamantly denied any involvement in Dawn's death and claimed the church was trying to frame him. Despite his claims that church members could cause serious harm, Nick was charged with first-degree murder and his bail was set at $750,000. Sandy's account, when relayed to the police, added to the frustration. Over the nearly 4-year delay in considering Nick a suspect or making an arrest. And her reason for cooperating, stemming from anger over Nick's relationships with other women in the church. Church members reported Nick's strange behavior and inappropriate relationships when questioned. They were also upset that he did not buy a tombstone for Dawn after receiving the life insurance payout. On September 17, 2001, Nick pleaded not guilty in court. He claimed that the church had cursed him and that Pastor Robert had a dark influence beyond the understanding of the police. When Nick's trial began, Nick Hatcheny was charged with aggravated first-degree murder, which carries a sentence of life in prison without parole. Witnesses, including women who were involved with Nick and church members who had been counseled by him, shared their testimonies with the jury. These testimonies showed the major impact the church had on their lives, including experiences of visions and messages supposedly from God. Nick used these to control and manipulate them. P.B. Smith's daughter also testified, sharing how she met Nick through her father when she was a teenager. Nick seduced her, and they had sex after Dawn's death. This continued until she moved away about a year later. Doctors and forensic experts also testified, emphasizing that Dawn's body held important clues regarding her death. However, these indicators were ignored, as mentioned earlier, because Nick was a pastor. However, on December 26, 2002, 5 years after Dawn's tragic death, the jury deliberated for a day before returning a guilty verdict on first-degree murder against Nick Hatcheny. At his sentencing hearing on February 7, 2003, Nick addressed the court, which was filled with Dawn's loved ones. He continued to maintain his innocence, but also expressed remorse for his actions and sadness for his family's loss, saying that Dawn deserved better treatment. He was sentenced to life in prison. However, in 2007, an appeal to the state Supreme Court resulted in his life sentence being modified. The appeal argued that, because Dawn died as a result of Nick strangling her, the original charge of aggravated first-degree murder in connection with her death by arson did not match her actual cause of death. The defense argued that Nick therefore did not deserve a life sentence. Ultimately, the state Supreme Court ruled in favor of the appeal, changing Nick's sentence to 26 years in prison. While in prison, Nick was involved in many positive initiatives. He co-founded the Environmental Progress Reentry Network and introduced a waste management system that used vermicompost. Nick could be released from prison soon, as he is eligible for parole in 2025. Sadly, Dawn's life took a tragic turn. She thought she had found the right person, but the reality was very different. This led to a devastating betrayal and her heartbreaking death. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Ben Rennick. Ben Rennick was born in August 1987 in Missouri. He grew up in a rural area with his family, including his older brother Sam, with whom he was very close. In 1989, the Rennick family moved to a picturesque farm. There, the two brothers enjoyed the outdoors, and it was during this time that Ben developed a passion for snakes. In September 1992, a tragic incident occurred for the Rennick family. While they were away, a gas leak caused an explosion that destroyed their beautiful home. As a result, the family was forced to move into a trailer. Later, Ben's mother, Kim, was diagnosed with terminal breast cancer. Despite the hardships they faced, the Rennick family remained united and supported each other through every challenge. After previous hardships, the family moved to a new house in 2002. Here, Ben was given a room to raise snakes. In 2009, after a long battle with cancer, Mrs. Kim passed away. Before she died, she asked her sons to promise to continue taking care of the farm and pass it on to the next generation. With an endless passion for snakes, Ben founded the company Rennick Reptiles, which quickly gained wide recognition. Thanks to this, he was able to export snakes to many countries around the world, from the UK to Japan. Snake breeding became his passion and purpose in life. He was known as an excellent breeder, dedicated to his work and more concerned with his love for snakes than profit. His reptile farm successfully bred and propagated many species of reptiles, from common species to some of the rarest in the world. The value of Ben's reptile collection was enormous. The snakes in his collection alone were estimated to be worth over $1 million. However, Ben felt lonely and wanted to have a family. In 2010, at a party, he met Lizzi, and they quickly developed a relationship. Just a few weeks later, Ben introduced Lizzi to his brother Sam and Sam's fiancé Eli. Both Eli and Lizzi had children from previous relationships, which made it easy for them to connect and become friends. Lizzi quickly integrated into the Rennick family and moved in with them. She helped Ben take care of the snake farm. They fell in love and lived like a real family, although they were not officially married. In March 2012, Lizzi gave birth to a baby girl named Amelia. Ben was very happy to be a father. However, their happy family life once again encountered difficulties. Frank Rennick, Ben's father, faced serious business difficulties. Before that, he made several illegal stock trades to pay for Kim's medical and treatment expenses. The day before the FBI was scheduled to come to investigate the farm, Frank committed suicide. His death put an end to the investigation. Frank's sons once again faced the pain of losing a loved one. Ben inherited the house and farm, while Sam received a sum of money much larger than the value of the house. Although each had their own families, they lived together as one big family in their parents' house. Sam did not hesitate to use his inheritance to renovate the farm, demonstrating the bond and solidarity between the two brothers. Initially, the relationship between the two brothers was quite good. However, financial disagreements soon caused a rift. After their father passed away, Ben focused on his business and family. He decided to marry Lizzi on April 14, 2014, officially making her a member of the Rennick family. Later, Lizzi and Ben opened a new business together, Essentia Spa Incorporated. However, the business managed by Lizzi encountered financial difficulties. Ben and Lizzi often argued about financial issues. Although Lizzi worked very hard, her income was still not enough to cover the salon's expenses. Meanwhile, Sam and his wife were also having financial difficulties. Ben allowed Sam and his wife to sell some of the furniture in their house to raise more money, but Lizzi did not agree with this decision. This incident led to a conflict between the two families, causing serious damage to their relationship that could not be repaired. Ben decided to improve his family's finances by selling some rare reptiles at a high price. However, this plan failed due to a serious incident at the farm. On June 8, 2017, Lizzi entered one of the warehouses and found Ben lying motionless in a pool of blood on the floor. Panicking, Lizzi called her brother Sam and the emergency services for help. She reported that she had found her husband lying unconscious on the ground. During the conversation, Lizzi dropped the phone and ran away. Sam continued the call and confirmed that his brother had passed away. He suspected that the cause of death could be a snake bite. The Montgomery County Sheriff was called to a snake farm for the first time in many years. Law enforcement officers were nervous about entering the farm, which housed more than 3,000 snakes. They were to examine a man lying in a pool of blood and were on guard against a possible attack by a venomous viper, which was initially believed to have caused the victim's death. When police investigator Dave Colbert arrived at the scene and examined it closely, he discovered a shell casing on a shelf at eye level. This discovery suggested that this was not a snake bite, as initially thought, but a more serious homicide. The shell casing was found near Ben's body, but no weapon was found. The killer had shot the victim multiple times in the back and head. Remarkably, no one in the family heard the gunshots or saw the attacker. Sam and Lindley were summoned to the sheriff's office for questioning. Lindley suspected Sam of being involved in her husband's death and provided a clear motive that Ben wanted to sell the house, but Sam was adamantly opposed. To clarify the matter, Sam was asked to take a lie detector test, which he successfully passed. The police released Lindley and Sam because there was not enough evidence to hold them. An investigation into the motive for Ben's murder was launched. Initially, the police suspected a robbery, but this theory was not confirmed, as all the rare snakes and valuables were still intact at the scene. Just a few days after Ben's death, the police questioned Lindley. They tested her hands and clothes for gunpowder, but the results were negative. After her husband's funeral, Lindley cut off contact with Sam and Eli. She sold her husband's company, inherited the house, and filed a $1 million life insurance claim on Ben. After receiving the insurance money, Lindley decided to sell the Rennick family home for $740,000. The Rennick family was told they would have to move. Sam began to suspect his brother's wife of being involved in Ben's death when he discovered that the insurance claim was settled quickly and the family business was sold shortly thereafter. Sam shared his suspicions with the investigating authorities. As a result, Lindley was brought in for further questioning. During the interrogation, Lindley admitted to having a complicated relationship with her husband, Ben. She also revealed that she occasionally met another man named Eric. However, Eric was ruled out as a suspect because he had an alibi. What was shocking was Lindley's confession that about 3 years after marrying Ben, she had been having affairs with at least 2 other men. Text messages between Ben and his wife showed that he suspected her of having an affair, causing tension in their relationship. On October 5, 2017, the Missouri Highway Patrol administered a lie detector test to Lindley, which she failed. However, due to a lack of concrete evidence in the case, she was released. Although progress has slowed, the investigation into Ben's death continues. A report of police reports shows, a month before Ben Rennick's death, Lindley made her first attempt to kill her husband. She fabricated a story about Ben being an abusive husband who regularly abused and beat her. Lindley told this story to a co-worker at the spa, hoping to gain sympathy and support. Investigators discovered this after Ben died. Lindley Rennick and her accomplice conspired to kill Ben by mixing 15 Percocet pills into a protein shake. Ben drank the shake without realizing it, making him seriously ill for a while, but he eventually survived. Ben had no idea he had been poisoned. Investigators subsequently questioned Lindley 6 times about the incident. A surprising breakthrough in the investigation occurred on January 14, 2020, when a key piece of information was revealed from a state prison. A witness named Brandon Blackwell claimed to know about Ben's death. Brandon told Missouri State Highway Patrol investigators that Lindley was the one who shot Ben and that she had conspired with her ex-boyfriend. Brandon revealed that he and Lindley had been having an affair while she was still married to Ben. A year and a half after Ben's death, Brandon and Lindley had a child together. However, they broke up in 2019. Brandon claimed that Lindley had admitted to him that she had been having affairs, specifically with Ashley Shaw, a co-worker at the spa where she worked, and Michael Humphrey, another ex-boyfriend. Years after Ben's death, Lindley and her ex-lover Michael Humphrey were arrested in connection with Ben's death. However, after their arrests, both blamed each other. The question remains, who really killed Ben? According to Michael's testimony, on the day of the incident, he accompanied Lindley to the farm. Lindley asked Michael to pretend to be the buyer and wear gloves. Although initially assigned to shoot Ben, Michael failed to do so. In the end, Lindley took the gun and shot her husband to death. The investigation into Ben's death lasted 3 years. By January 16, 2020, authorities had issued arrest warrants for 3 suspects: Lindley, Michael Humphrey, and Ashley Shaw. Ashley was granted immunity in exchange for her cooperation in the case. She testified in court against her former employer. The former spa employee revealed that Lindley had been complaining about her husband and had convinced her to join in on the scheme. She told that Lindley claimed that Ben had been demeaning, insulting, and even physically abusive to Lindley. Fearing that she would lose custody of their children after the divorce, Lindley decided to get rid of her husband, Ben. She and Michael conspired to poison Ben with a lethal cocktail. When questioned, Lindley and Michael blamed each other for Ben's death. In October 2021, Michael Humphrey appeared in court in Ine County. His attorney hoped that revealing the murder weapon would reduce the charge to second-degree murder. Although Michael had the gun involved, no conclusive DNA evidence was found on it. To get his sentence reduced, Michael cooperated with prosecutors by revealing the location of the murder weapon. As a result, he was convicted of second-degree murder, a lesser charge. On January 3, 2021, no plea was entered, and Michael was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole. Lindley's trial began on December 6, 2021. She was charged with fatally shooting her husband, Ben, on June 8, 2017, at his snake farm in New Florence. According to court records, the plan to kill Ben began at Lindley's spa. According to the statement, Lindley may have made up the story about domestic violence because she feared that Ben would learn of her financial difficulties and take away her children. The first time Lindley attempted to kill Ben, she tried to spike his protein shake with narcotics. The trial detailed the day of Ben's murder, replaying the entire sequence of events through cross-examination. On the day of the murder, Michael picked up Lindley at the spa. Ashley also used Lindley's phone to send text messages from inside the spa, creating false evidence of their location and misleading the investigation. According to court records, Michael intended to kill Ben but asked Lindley to do it. After the shooting, Michael tried to collect all the shell casings but missed some in his haste. He then returned to the spa and threw away Lindley's clothes after she showered, in an attempt to remove gunpowder residue from her body and clothes from the day of the murder. Defense attorney Catherine Barrer asked Lindley to share her personal and family history, her education, her relationship with her ex-boyfriend Michael, as well as her work history and the events that led to her marriage to Ben. The lawyer presented Lindley as a victim of domestic violence. However, no evidence of such violence was found, which weakened this defense. Michael was part of a group accused of planning to kill Ben. Lindley described her relationship with Michael as complex and codependent, involving Michael's drug dealing and her drug addiction. According to witness testimony, Lindley ended her relationship with Michael in late 2010, but they reconnected about a month before Ben's death. Lindley denied the prosecution's allegations of planning to kill Ben, including trying to poison him with a protein shake laced with an addictive substance. In court, Lindley admitted to having affairs with several men and expressed deep remorse. When considering divorce, she did not know who to turn to for advice. As her father was divorced and held strong views on divorce and adultery, Lindley wanted support when talking to Ben, so she contacted her ex-boyfriends, which led to her reconnecting with Michael. During the trial, Lindley admitted to participating in her husband's death and concealing Michael's involvement. She said the reasons were marital problems, including arguments, allegations of abuse by Ben, and stress related to his snake business. Fearful of Ben's reaction to the divorce, Lindley brought Michael to the farm on June 8, 2017. She claimed that her intention was to file for divorce, not to harm Ben. Lindley said that she took Ben's trash to throw away, then went into the nursery and saw Michael and Ben washing their hands. She did not hear their conversation because she was focused on thinking about how to talk to Ben about the divorce. Lindley recounted in a trembling voice how Michael pulled out a gun and shot her husband. She screamed and ran outside, hearing several more gunshots. Shocked and panicked, she only remembers staring at the trees as Michael ran up and pushed her toward the car. When she returned to the snake farm, Lindley discovered Ben's body. She called Ben's brother, Sam, and they checked to see if Ben was still alive by checking his pulse and breathing. Lindley expressed regret for not telling the police right away that she was there with Michael and for not telling them what happened. Due to suspicions of her involvement in her husband's death, the $1 million life insurance policy Ben had purchased long ago could be contested. Lindley has waived her right to the money. Ben became the beneficiary of a trust fund after his father's death. The assets belonged to Ben and his children, not Lindley. However, Lindley received the money she contributed to the trust fund, along with her daughter's scholarship. Lindley admitted to seeking support by sharing her story with her then-boyfriend, Brandon Blackwell. However, the relationship ended shortly after Lindley gave birth to Brandon's child. At trial, Lindley expressed regret for repeatedly lying. "I was just trying to avoid the truth of what happened," she said, and insisted she never wanted her husband to die. Following the final verdict, Lindley's defense team did not file a motion for a new trial. No appeals have been filed against her conviction. However, Lindley filed a defamation lawsuit against Blackwell, claiming that his statements about her involvement in her husband's death were false. However, prosecutor Kevin Zellner questioned Lindley's testimony during cross-examination. He asked why she did not check on her husband after hearing the gunshots, why she did not call 911, why she sent friendly text messages to her husband and Michael after the shooting, and why she continued to lie even after emergency responders were involved. Prosecutor Kevin portrayed Lindley as a clumsy but ruthless mastermind in the murder. Lindley admitted to suggesting that police consider Ben's brother, the victim, as a suspect. During the trial, Kevin criticized Lindley's coldness in accusing the deceased's brother. During the sentencing hearing for second-degree murder and armed criminal action, Lindley broke down and cried but still did not admit her guilt. On December 9, 2021, Lindley, 33, was convicted of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to 13 years in prison for the murder and an additional 3 years for the armed criminal action. In total, Judge Kevin Crane sentenced her to 16 years in prison the following January. Sam and Ben's family were furious about the sentence. They believe that both Michael and Lindley deserve life in prison, as they are as guilty as their co-defendants. Sam expressed deep disappointment and surprise when he realized that in Missouri, a human life is only valued at 13 years in prison. Ben was a promising young man. However, due to the actions of a woman, he and Sam fell into an awkward situation, causing irreparable damage to their relationship. Despite this, Ben continued to live a dignified life. He became famous for his talent in breeding snakes and even created a new species of snake named after him. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Amanda Blackburn. Amanda Grace Byers Blackburn was born on July 31, 1987, in Muskegon, Michigan. She began her education in Indianapolis, Indiana, but her family moved to Elkhart in 1995. In Elkhart, Amanda graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006. She then continued her education and graduated with an associate degree from Pensacola Christian College in Florida in 2008. Amanda grew up in a family with strong religious beliefs. Her father was the lead pastor at the First Baptist Church in Elkhart, Indiana. From a young age, she was taught about Christianity and the importance of God's Word. Amanda was well-versed in the church's religious traditions, sermons, and psalms, and she always respected these values. While many other young people were eager to experience adult life, attend parties, and fall in love, Amanda had a love for Jesus and a desire to serve Him. God also loved Amanda because He created her as an angel, a blonde. Slim girl with a bright smile, kind and sincere. Not only is Amanda beautiful, but her soul and heart are also very pure. Her every action shows love for those around her. When she was a teenager, Amanda vowed to remain pure and not kiss any man until marriage. She always kept that promise. However, her heart was deeply moved when she met her true and only love, Davy Blackburn, a boy from Tuscaloosa, Alabama. He studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and came from a Christian family with strong faith. Davy and Amanda first met on a blind date at a concert by the Christian band Hawk Nelson, organized by Amanda's sister and Davy's best friend. At that time, they were studying at different universities, but every vacation, they spent time together. It was a pure and innocent love, not dominated by worldly desires. Davy and Amanda often went for walks together, shared their innermost thoughts and favorite quotes from church books. They always found joy in the little things and loved to joke with each other sincerely. Before returning to school, they held a fake milkshake drinking contest, and Amanda lost. Davy jokingly called her Milk Girl. When he looked at Amanda, he realized that she was the girl he wanted to marry. Amanda and Davy had a long-distance relationship. They kept in touch via text messages and phone calls, spending hours talking to each other. Every vacation, they spent time together. They took their relationship so seriously that they even sought counseling from a psychologist to learn how to communicate better. On August 1, 2008, Amanda and Davy got married. After the wedding, Davy shared with friends that from the moment he kissed Amanda, he felt a special connection between them, and he believed it was part of God's plan for them. On the morning of November 10, 2015, a car parked outside a house on Sunnyfield Court. Davy was returning from his daily workout at the gym. He was about to get out of the car, but a phone call kept him in the car for a few minutes. After ending the call, he leisurely got out of the car and walked into the house. When he opened the door, he froze and his gym bag fell from his hands. His wife was lying on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Davy was confused and in shock. He ran to his wife, did a preliminary check, took her pulse, and urgently called the emergency number. Amanda appeared to be alive. In the living room where the tragedy occurred, everything was in disarray. Furniture was scattered everywhere, and her purse was empty. On the second floor of the house, her child was crying. Emergency services arrived at the house 8 minutes later. The area was cordoned off. The house was packed with police and investigators. She was taken to the hospital. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially confirmed dead, Davy released an official statement, saying that Amanda had dedicated her life to loving and serving those around her. Amanda had made it her mission to help more people come to know Jesus as their personal savior. Davy believed that through Amanda's death and legacy, more people would find faith in Christ. He affirmed that they would continue the work they had begun in Indianapolis. Davy expressed his strong belief that God was good, that their tragedy was turning into victory, and that the best was yet to come. The murder of Amanda shocked not only the Orthodox family but the entire state. People demanded that the perpetrators of the murders of Amanda and her unborn child be found and punished. In his first interview, Davy described how he found his wife, Amanda, severely injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was only partially dressed, with her underwear lying nearby, face down in a pool of blood. Davy said he left the house around 6 a.m. to exercise and left the door unlocked. "I always do that, I leave without locking the door," he told investigators. It is unclear whether the criminals would have stopped if Davy had locked the door. However, locking the door would have made it more difficult for them to enter, giving Amanda more time to call for help. Unfortunately, that did not happen, and Amanda was shot 3 times, including once in the head. In the days following the incident, police had not arrested the perpetrator. They quickly ruled out the possibility that Davey, Amanda's husband, was involved in the horrific attack. The police have taken a statement from Scott Floyd, an Indianapolis Fire Department paramedic. Scott was the first to arrive at the scene after Davey called 911. When he arrived, he found Davey standing at the end of the driveway with blood on his hands. Scott noted that Davey appeared calm and did not seem to understand what had happened to Amanda. Davey told Scott that Amanda was lying on the floor and that he could not wake her up. Davey said that he got home from the gym at 7:30 a.m. and called his friend Kenneth Wagner while he was in the driveway. He ended the call and entered the house at 8:10 a.m., where he found Amanda lying face down on the floor. Thinking that Amanda was sick or unconscious, he called 911 at 8:22 a.m., 12 minutes after discovering her. That is a long time in an emergency. Davey repeatedly stated he thought there was a problem with the pregnancy, suspecting Amanda had become dizzy and fallen. However, it was suspicious that after 12 minutes, he did not notice a brain mass about 5 feet from her body. Emergency room physician Scott Floyd determined that Amanda's head had clotted, suggesting that the shooting may have occurred several hours before she was taken to the hospital. However, this information was not officially released. When questioned, Davey said that after calling 911, he contacted his father. Defense attorneys did not question Davey further. Authorities verified Davey's account through surveillance cameras at the gym and ruled him out as a suspect. An autopsy performed on November 12 showed that Amanda had been shot 3 times, once in the back of the head, once in the left arm, and once through the upper back. She also had several scratches on her left cheek, a laceration to her lip, and a missing lower tooth. These injuries suggested that a struggle may have occurred between Amanda and her attacker. The investigation was extensive, including reviewing security cameras from nearby streets and interviewing neighbors and family acquaintances. One neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davey left the house. Reginald Townsell, another neighbor, commented that their neighborhood did not typically experience shootings and that the Blackburns did not deserve this. The community was shocked by the incident, as they considered the Blackburns to be good and likable people. Based on Amanda's injuries and the loss of her bank cards and MacBook bag, police initially thought it might have been a robbery. After the murder of Amanda, on the morning of November 10, 2015, the police received multiple emergency calls reporting a series of break-ins near Blackburn's home, which occurred at approximately 5:20 a.m. One victim, a woman, woke up to find her mobile phone, laptop, wallet, keys, and car missing. The sliding glass door to her flat was open. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary at her home on Sunnyfield Court. The break-in happened when the burglars smashed the glass door of her porch to gain entry. According to the police report, several valuables were taken, including 4 televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding. Indianapolis Police Lieutenant Richard stated they were investigating the connection between the murder and other burglaries that occurred in the area that morning. To maintain the confidentiality of the investigation, the police are not releasing many details. However, after collecting images of the suspects from one of the homes that were broken into, they released the images and asked for the public's help in identifying and providing information. Davey is confident in the police's efforts to catch the perpetrators of his wife's murder. Investigators said they have been given unprecedented powers of investigation. They hope promising leads will soon help identify the perpetrators. The main clues used to track down the suspects were a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and ATM receipts. Receipts and a sweater were found in a stolen Chrysler Sebring used in the robbery. On November 11th, police impounded a vehicle near Blackburn's home. The receipts in the car had a debit card number that matched Amanda's stolen card. After obtaining a search warrant, investigators viewed ATM camera video, which showed the driver wearing a stolen pink beanie to cover his face. Police identified the suspects through three primary methods: DNA testing, surveillance cameras, and witness statements. DNA testing from a sweater confirmed Jaylen Watson as one of the suspects. The identification of Jaylen was a critical first step in the investigation, according to the report. Police obtained cell phone records for Jaylen and his friend, Diana Gordon. Jaylen's records were available because he had been paroled after a previous burglary conviction. These records showed that their phones were in the area where the crimes occurred. Additionally, phone records indicated that Diana and Jaylen were near the Chase Bank on the day of the murder, where Amanda's debit card was used. To complete the investigation, police reviewed surveillance footage in the area and identified Larry Taylor's phone number, which led to his address. Taylor was the final link in the case. In the following days, a gun was reported found near the Blackburn family home. According to police, a man gave the gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming to have found it outside Amanda's home. The gun was later analyzed by forensic experts. After 2 weeks of investigation and working with detectives, police charged Larry Taylor, 18, and Jaylen Watson, 21, with the murder of Amanda. A third burglary suspect, Diana Gordon, 24, was arrested for violating her parole but was not charged with a felony because she did not enter the Blackburn home. During questioning, Larry admitted to shooting the victim twice because she jumped on him and he was afraid of being scratched. After the victim fell, Larry shot her again in the back of the head and watched as she bled to death. The crime occurred when the three criminals broke into the Blackburn family home to rob money. They took advantage of the fact that Davy had left the door unlocked before going to exercise. Once inside, they prevented Amanda from approaching by threatening her with a gun, and Larry even fired at her. Jaylen and Diana, witnessing the tense situation with Amanda, decided to leave. They had obtained bank cards from a previous robbery and went to an ATM to withdraw money. Initially, they failed to withdraw $500 from one machine, but then succeeded in withdrawing $1,400 from another. This was when the security camera captured their images. They then drove back to the Blackburn house to pick up Larry. During their absence, a fight broke out in the house. Amanda woke up after being beaten and fought back against her attacker, who was assaulting another woman. Larry then placed the stolen credit cards in the car of an accomplice, who used the cards at an ATM at the time of the incident. Upon their return, Larry admitted to shooting Amanda. According to court records, Larry, Jaylen, and Diana committed 3 burglaries on November 10th, with the Blackburn home being the third target. In the first incident, they entered a home while the homeowner was sleeping and stole a laptop, a wallet, and a car. Despite discovering security cameras, they left without difficulty. In the second incident, they broke in through a porch window and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater. The sweater later helped police identify the group. The report outlines the evidence police gathered against the suspects based on court documents. The most crucial piece of evidence was Jaylen's DNA on the pink sweater, used in the second burglary and later to cover his face when he tried to withdraw cash using Amanda's bank card. Jaylen and Diana cooperated with the investigation in exchange for reduced sentences. Larry waived his right to remain silent and admitted to being near the scene of the burglary but claimed he was too confused to remember specifics. The district attorney filed formal charges. Larry faced 13 counts, including the attempted murder of Amanda Blackburn. Jaylen was charged with a felony. Both Larry and Jaylen faced multiple counts of burglary and robbery. Diana, in custody for a parole violation, was also charged with burglary. A fourth person who knew about the robberies and burglaries but did not participate was interviewed and released. The Indianapolis Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit, along with the Gang Unit and the FBI, worked to arrest Larry. Police Chief Rick Hite praised the cooperation that led to the suspect's arrest. Detectives worked tirelessly to investigate homicides in the city. With the assistance of Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and District Attorney Terry Curry, justice was served. Because the victim was pregnant, prosecutors considered additional charges related to the fetus. Though the victim's underwear was removed and her shirt was pulled up, there was no evidence to support a rape charge. Larry's first trial in December 2021 was dismissed after a juror leaked information to other jurors. The trial was rescheduled for October 2022 with a more rigorous jury selection process. Over 100 jury candidates filled out a 16-page questionnaire for attorneys to evaluate their ability to render fair verdicts. Larry was sentenced to 86 years in the Indiana State Correctional Institution for the murder of Amanda and related burglary charges. Co-defendants Diana and Jalen pleaded guilty, testified against Larry, and received sentences of 20 to 35 years. Jalen and Larry are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. Under Indiana law, penalties for murder range from 45 to 60 years, with the possibility of life imprisonment or the death penalty in some cases. Prosecutors have requested that Larry be given an additional 20 years in prison because Amanda was pregnant at the time of her murder. Davey, the victim's husband and a pastor, expressed relief that the perpetrator was caught and could no longer harm others. The case has shocked many, including state leaders. Amanda's funeral was held at a Catholic church with more than 2,000 people in attendance, including Governor Mike Pence. The local church has set up a fundraising page to help with Amanda's funeral and medical expenses. Davey expressed hope that the justice system will wisely deal with those who have caused great pain to his family. Surprisingly, he has repeatedly said he forgives his wife's killers. Davey told the press, "I felt relieved when I heard about the arrest. Although I wanted to hate, feel anger, and despair, I chose the path of forgiveness, tolerance, and hope." Amanda's case has attracted widespread attention, being reported in many media outlets both domestically and internationally. After his wife's death, Davey transformed from the role of a grieving husband to a popular blogger. He created a series of podcasts and videos called Nothing Wasted, discussing his experience. Davey appeared regularly on television, talking about his wife's death and the pain he had gone through. However, his behavior was not typical of a grieving person. The tragedy seemed to bring Davey both fame and fortune. The fact that he received insurance money after his wife's death has raised questions about whether forgetting to lock the door on November 10, 2015, was really an accident. On March 2, 2016, Davey bought a spacious new home with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, and a pool. He also sold the house where his late wife Amanda was murdered. Despite his recent loss, Davey was quite optimistic. In July 2016, he posted a photo of his new home on his blog with the caption, "I'm excited to have a pool party at my new home." Today, Davey is remarried and happily so. He shared, "Everything makes sense. I feel blessed. When I focus on Jesus and look at his wonderful face, everything mundane becomes small in the light of his glory and goodness." Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Rachel Anderson. Rachel Anderson was born on January 28, 1994, in Warren, Ohio, to William, Bill Anderson and Patricia, Trish Anderson. She had a younger brother, John, who was a common family favorite. Rachel graduated from Warren Harding High School in 2012, where she was a member of the National Honor Society and excelled in soccer and volleyball. Unlike many of her peers, Rachel pursued an unconventional career. From a young age, she aspired to become a funeral director. To achieve her goal, she attended Youngstown State University, where she studied mortuary science. Her dedication earned her a spot on the list of top students, and she received a scholarship. Rachel later furthered her education at Cincinnati College of Mortuary Science, graduating in 2016 with a bachelor's degree in mortuary science. After becoming a member of the Ohio Funeral Directors Association, Rachel moved to Columbus to start her internship at Shaw Davis Funeral Home. She was deeply respectful of her work and felt a strong sense of duty to support grieving families. With her internship nearing its end, she hoped to secure a full-time position at the funeral home. However, her dreams and ambitions were tragically extinguished. Rachel's body was then sent to the morgue for a more thorough examination. The investigation began with interviews of key witnesses, and an autopsy was conducted to analyze the full extent of Rachel's severe injuries. The results showed that she had been strangled and stabbed. Specifically, she had a scalp laceration and skull fractures at the base of her head. The stab wound, located at the back of her neck, penetrated deep into her brain, damaging the left hemisphere. Rachel was killed with extreme force, as seen in the autopsy results where part of her skull was broken off. The autopsy also showed she was strangled using an electric blanket cord, which led to severe internal bleeding in her neck and chest area, as well as in her eyelids. Furthermore, the blood vessels in her eyes became filled with blood due to the strangulation. Additional forensic evidence indicated that Rachel was alive when the perpetrator restrained her, shown by bruises and red marks on her wrists and ankles. A DNA sample was discovered on the rope used to restrain Rachel and on her body. The coroner's autopsy results concluded that Rachel's death was ultimately caused by a stab wound to the head and neck, rather than strangulation as initially thought. The police interviewed several co-workers and Rachel's ex-boyfriend, who had an alibi for the time of the murder. Detectives returned to Rachel's apartment to conduct a search for evidence or clues that could lead them to the culprit. In the living room, the police discovered Rachel's purse, but it was missing her wallet. This led them to initially suspect a robbery. However, 2 weeks later, a crucial piece of evidence was found: a 9-inch steak knife used in the crime. It was discovered by Rachel's mother in a box in her apartment. However, the severity of the torture suggested that the perpetrator was not just a common thief, but rather someone who carefully planned their actions and took pleasure in having control over the victim. During the investigation, detectives explored various motives behind Rachel's death but struggled to identify suspects. The details of her death were kept under wraps to maintain the investigation's secrecy and prevent tipping off the perpetrator. The discovery of DNA evidence on Rachel's body and at the crime scene initially brought new hope to the investigation. However, it was ultimately unsuccessful since the DNA samples did not match any profiles in the existing database. A new clue emerged when investigators obtained video footage from street surveillance cameras. The footage showed 2 individuals using Rachel's car to drive around the city after her murder, and it was also discovered that cash had been withdrawn from her debit and credit cards. A further investigation using location services revealed a phone number that was in house Rachel's on January 28, 2018, between 7:59 p.m. and 9:25 p.m. By analyzing this evidence, authorities were able to track the location of the suspect. The investigation led to identifying the account holder linked to the phone number, ultimately revealing the suspect. The suspect was identified as 54 years old Anthony Pardon, an offender with a long history of serious crime, including multiple rapes, robbery, kidnapping, and attempted murder. Anthony had previously spent a total of 33 years in prison for these crimes. Anthony's early life was troubled. Initially, he living with grandparents, he moved to live with his mother. As a child, he received diagnoses of conduct disorder and antisocial personality disorder. In March 1979, at the age of 14, he was temporarily committed to the Ohio Youth Commission. Later that year, in July, he was placed in the custody of the court and temporarily transferred to Franklin County Children's Services. In December, Anthony was convicted of making threats and subsequently transferred to the Ohio Youth Commission, where he was placed in foster care. The following year, in 1980, Anthony, then 15 years old, was charged with abuse after assaulting the son of his foster parents. He confessed to the police that he committed the crime due to being emotionally distressed following a heated argument with his girlfriend. In another incident on November 13, 1981, 16-year-old Anthony was convicted of several crimes. He had entered his girlfriend's 39-year-old mother's home to use the phone, but he pulled out a butcher knife, sexually assaulted her, and stole $100 from her purse. He then gagged she, tied her hands and feet, and placed her in the trunk of his car. Anthony drove her to Valleydale, where he untied her feet and attempted to drown her in a river behind the Valleydale Ballroom. However, the woman managed to stay afloat. He then got into the water and held her head underwater, but a passerby intervened and scared him away. The woman survived the assault. Anthony escaped before the police arrived and used the stolen money to purchase tennis shoes and jogging uniforms. In May 1982, in Franklin, Anthony was convicted of various crimes at the age of 17. As a result, he received a prison sentence ranging from 5 to 25 years. During his time in prison, he committed several disciplinary offenses, including possession of a prohibited weapon, setting fire to a mattress, and engaging in physical altercations. He ultimately spent over 24 years behind bars, then being released in November 2006. After his release, Anthony moved to Georgia and applied for a job under a false name. However, his freedom was short-lived. In 2007, he was charged with forgery in Floyd County and received another conviction. This led to a 9-year prison sentence, followed by 20 years of probation and the requirement to wear a GPS ankle monitor. He was released from prison in 2017 and returned to Ohio in June of that year, through an interstate agreement. Upon his return to Ohio, Anthony was placed under the supervision of the Adult Parole Authority and was required to check in with the local sheriff's department every 90 days. Unfortunately, due to budget constraints and negligence on the part of state authorities, he was able to roam free once again without adequate oversight. On August 21, 2017, he was found with lock up a woman in his car. 6 days later, he was stopped for driving without a license and was discovered to be in possession of a kitchen knife and a shotgun. Despite these incidents, he was not taken into custody. The investigation into Rachel's case continued to unfold. Security footage revealed a man getting out of Rachel's car and entering a store, while the driver remained out of sight. Police interviewed store employees and eventually identified the man as Anthony Sleets, a local homeless man. Sleets was questioned by police a couple of days later. He claimed that an older man approached him and asked for his help in cashing in his ex-girlfriend's cards. Sleets agreed, becoming an accomplice in the case. During questioning, he confirmed that the older man was Anthony Pardon and provided details of their actions on the evening of January 28, 2018, when they attempted to use Rachel's stolen cards. The next step was to find and apprehend Anthony Pardon. After several days of surveillance on Anthony's sister's house, he was finally caught on February 9, 2018. Anthony, 54 years old, with a history of offenses, was charged with 9 counts, including burglary, aggravated robbery, kidnapping, rape, and murder. The trial of Rachel Anderson's case began on February 4, 2020. On the first day, 4 witnesses took the stand, including Jonathan Kennedy, who discovered Rachel's body, and the apartment complex manager. Officer Frank Ghani also testified, describing what he saw from his car outside the complex and the surveillance footage he witnessed. Jonathan found Rachel's body, and Officer Ghani was nearby. Over the next few days, additional witnesses testified, including Anderson's brother John, Special Agent Joshua Durst on February 5th, and lead detective Art Hughes on February 6th. The defendant, Anthony Pardon, expressed dissatisfaction with his lawyers on February 6th and requested new lawyers. However, this was likely a delaying tactic court session by he. On February 10th, the prosecution presented expert witnesses, including a latent print expert. He explained the technology used to track Rachel's debit card usage and its connection to the crime scene. Anthony's sister later took the stand and revealed that her younger brother had given her a debit card, claiming it belonged to his girlfriend. After watching a TV news report, she realized the card actually belonged to the victim, Rachel Anderson. The final day of testimony, February 11th, featured crucial evidence. The medical examiner testified that Anthony's DNA was found at the crime scene. A forensic pathologist and deputy coroner from Franklin County gave detailed accounts of Rachel's injuries. Through the various testimonies, the court was provided with a detailed account of Rachel's final days. On January 26, 2018, Rachel turned 24 years old. Her brother John traveled from Warren to Columbus to celebrate with her. The following day, Rachel and her brother visited their friend, John Kennedy, where a birthday party was held in her congratulations. After the party, she and her brother spent the night at Kennedy's house. The next day, January 28, Rachel went to work, leaving the key to her apartment with her brother. However, when John returned to his hometown, he unintentionally took the key with him. Later that afternoon, around 1 o'clock, Rachel sent a text to Kennedy, asking to pick up his spare key to her apartment. Rachel spoke with her mother around 6:30 in the evening and then retrieved her key from Kennedy. After stopping for dinner, Rachel returned to her apartment at approximately 7:30 p.m. As her apartment door could only be locked from the outside with a key, it was left unlocked. Anthony abducted Anderson inside the apartment building. He took her to the top floor, where he violently restrained her using the cord from a hair dryer to tie her feet and ankles, and a belt along with blind cords to bind her hands. Once Rachel was unable to move, Anthony used a curling iron cord to restrict her wrists and prevent her from screaming. He also gagged her to further silence her. Under duress, Rachel was forced to reveal her bank card PIN numbers to her attacker. He then subjected her to torture and took advantage of her. The attack resulted in Anderson's death when he used a cord from an electric blanket to strangle them. In addition, she suffered blunt force trauma and a stab wound to the head. After committing the crime, Anthony carefully concealed Rachel's body in a closet. He left her partially naked, with the electric blanket cord wrapped around her neck and tied to the door handle. Anthony then proceeded to steal Rachel's car and used her bank cards to make multiple purchases at various stores in Columbus. The defense presented no witnesses during the trial. The final hearing took place on February 12. Assistant Prosecutor Amy Van Killen presented the state's initial argument, outlining a chronological sequence of incident and asserting to the jury that Anthony intentionally murdered Rachel brutally. In his argument, Anthony's attorney, Larry Thomas, acknowledged that his client used Rachel's credit cards but disputed Anthony's involvement in the crime. Larry argued that the prosecution's case relied on speculation and the DNA and cell phone evidence failed to prove Anthony's guilt. After roughly 6 hours of deliberation, the jury, composed of 4 men and 8 women, finding Anthony guilty on all charges. The prosecution sought the death penalty, pointing to the serious nature of the burglary and the defendant's previous conviction for a similar crime that involved attempting to kill a woman. Due to Anthony's extensive history of criminal behavior, prosecutors requested the death penalty instead of leniency. According to Prosecutor O'Brien, certain individuals consistently disregard the law, and Anthony Pardon is a prime example. The sentencing phase commenced on February 18th. In an effort to reduce the severity of the sentence, the defense highlighted Anthony's troubled childhood as a mitigating factor. However, prosecutors countered that the aggravating circumstances outweighed any mitigating factors. During the trial, it was established that Anthony was fully aware of his actions when he attacked Rachel. Despite this, several people testified in his defense, including his mother, sister, a psychologist, and his former elementary school teacher. Anthony gave an impromptu 13-minute statement to the jury. During this time, he discussed the abuse he suffered in his childhood and the hardships he faced after being released from prison, expressing feelings of helplessness. Anthony claimed that the justice system had failed him and that he received no support, ultimately blaming the system for his current circumstances. However, Anthony did not directly address the crime he committed or offer an apology for his actions. After 3.5 hours of deliberation, the jury sentenced Anthony to life imprisonment without parole. The sentencing took place on March 16, 2020. Rachel's mother was visibly emotional in court as the verdict was announced. Rachel's father felt shocked that Anthony is blaming the system for his actions, rather than taking responsibility for what happened. He acknowledged that the system does have its flaws, but in this case, it was Rachel who was ultimately let down. Judge McIntosh delivered the verdict, sentencing Anthony Pardon to life sentences without parole for aggravated murder and violence. Additionally, Anthony received 63 years in prison for various other charges, including aggravated burglary, kidnapping, and aggravated robbery. Rachel's life was tragically cut short when she passed away on her 24th birthday. At the time of her death, she was nearing the end of her internship and was close to securing a promising job. Rachel was laid to rest at Pineview Memorial Park, leaving behind her family and friends were left to cope with the unexpected and devastating loss. Welcome back, mystery lovers. Today's case is going to keep you on the edge of your seat. The case of Jessica Chambers. On December 6, 2014, at 20:09, emergency services responded to a report of a car on fire in a rural area. The first firefighters to arrive discovered a burning car and began extinguishing the flames immediately. The interior of the car was filled with thick black smoke that rose rapidly. As the rescuers poured foam on the car, they accidentally saw a dark figure slowly emerging from the nearby bushes. The figure looked like a young woman. The fire department approached and discovered that it was a young woman. She was severely burned, wearing only her underwear. The extent of her injuries, with burns covering her entire body. Her clothes had been burned, her skin was melting and slowly dripping, and her entire body was bleeding. Her hair had turned into a black ash, and her face was black with soot. Rescuers carefully wrapped the young woman in a blanket as she lay on the ground, waiting for paramedics to arrive. Firefighters were at her side, tending to her. Although she could barely move her lips due to the severity of her injuries, the woman still managed to speak. When asked for her attacker's name, some emergency responders heard the names Derek or Derek. She was airlifted from the small town to a hospital in Memphis. Unfortunately, the young woman's condition became critical. With approximately 93% of her body burned, she died from her injuries just 4 hours after arriving. The victim was identified as Jessica Chambers, a 19-year-old local resident. Jessica grew up in Cortland, where her mother and grandmother lived nearby. Her father and stepmother also lived in the same town but in a different location. She was a petite woman, but Jessica had a strong and determined personality. She experienced a rather complicated living environment. About her family, her father pleaded guilty to manufacturing methamphetamine and was arrested for drunk driving in the early 2000s. In 2006, her 28-year-old neighbor was shot multiple times in her yard. Growing up in such a negative environment, Jessica developed a rebellious personality. She smoked, argued with her parents, had unstable relationships with boyfriends, and had legal troubles, Jessica's behavior became more evident at the age of 17 after the death of her brother Alan in a car accident in 2012. She moved out of her mother's house a few months later because her mother did not approve of Jessica's new boyfriend. Jessica's childhood was very difficult. Her father was in prison for a while, but in 2014, he was released and worked as a mechanic at the local police department. Jessica used to deal illegal drugs and had ties to local gangs. However, Jessica is sweet and funny and is respected and loved by most people. News of a burning car quickly spread throughout her small town. Jessica's father was quickly notified of the car fire. Upon hearing the news, he rushed to inform Jessica's mother of the tragic incident. They rushed to the hospital. Jessica's death shocked the nation, attracting widespread attention. Hundreds attended her funeral on December 13th, a memorial service to honor an active and ambitious teenager who had been a cheerleader and had big dreams. A thorough investigation into the high-profile case was launched, attracting great public interest. To assist local authorities, the FBI, ATF, and the U.S. Marshals were called in. Initial investigations suggested that the fire may have been caused by a car accident, but this theory was quickly dismissed. A closer inspection of the scene revealed no signs of emergency braking or obstructions, and an examination of the burned-out vehicle revealed no damage or signs of collision on the body. Arson therefore became the leading theory, but the police faced a challenge due to a lack of clues and evidence, slowing down the investigation. Following her death, some believed that Jessica had inadvertently put herself in danger by associating with a local gang. However, gang members have strongly denied any involvement and sent condolences to Jessica's family. The police have summoned several people for questioning, but have yet to gather any clues. The investigation has stalled. No suspects have been found, nor a motive for such a brutal act. Public pressure for the investigation to seek justice has slowed the investigation and continuously provided false clues about Jessica's life. Several theories have emerged on social media, suggesting that Brian Rudd, Jessica's ex-boyfriend from high school, may have acted out of jealousy. Another theory is that Jessica sold low-quality drugs to someone for a few $100s, potentially angering a drug dealer who sought revenge. District Attorney John Champion described the case as the most mysterious he has worked on in his 22 years in the county. He has been investigating Jessica's case since December, working with local police and multiple agencies, including the MBI, FBI, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms and Explosives, and the U.S. Marshals Service. During the investigation, they interviewed more than 130 people, some of whom have since been re-interviewed, including individuals named Eric and Derek. Despite these efforts, no suspects have been arrested. Police have recreated the final week of Jessica's life in detail. On December 5, 2014, her last day, Jessica received a cell phone call from a friend, urging her to drive to the M&M Mini Mart. There, she purchased $14 worth of gas and left at 5:15 p.m. About 30 minutes later, at 5:45 p.m., she contacted her mother to say she would be home soon. At that time, Jessica had her hair tied in a bun and was wearing camouflage pajama pants. After a few more stops, including one at an unidentified house and another in the nearest town, Jessica arrived at the location where her life would tragically end. It is likely that the person who would eventually take her life was in the car with her at the time. Meanwhile, surveillance footage captured a man in a striped shirt filling a gas tank and then driving off in the same direction as Jessica. Despite this clue, no further information about the man's movements after that point was available. Jessica's cell phone records revealed important information about her final moments. They indicated that she spent approximately 10 to 15 minutes near a stoplight on Highway 2, heading toward Batesville. However, there was an unexplained 62-minute gap between 6:30 p.m. and 7:32 p.m. By 7:30 p.m., Her phone was at the location on Heron Road where her burning car was later discovered. Many questions remain about what Chambers was doing during this mysterious hour and what ultimately led to her tragic fate. The investigation was slow going. It wasn't until December 2015, in a separate case involving charges of illegal possession of weapons, narcotics, and counterfeit goods, that 17 suspected gang members were arrested. At the time, District Attorney John Champion did not expect any gang members to be directly involved in the arson. However, during plea negotiations, gang members were given the opportunity to cooperate with the investigation. As a result, they identified Quinton Tellis, a man who had been with victim Jessica about an hour before the fire. In February 2016, police temporarily closed the case to conduct a further investigation and determine the motive behind Jessica's disappearance. The lack of an official suspect led to a surge of unfounded speculation circulating online and throughout the town. As a result, the case attracted the attention of the police online, and a Facebook page called Justice for Jessica was created, offering a $50,000 reward for any information or clues that could lead to the arrest of the perpetrator. Rumors also circulated online that Jessica, who had previously dated African-American men, had been targeted by white supremacists for her involvement in interracial relationships. However, others suggested that the perpetrator was African-American because Jessica had been in a gang, and that she may have tried to leave and was killed. None of these theories were ever officially confirmed. After examining Jessica's cell phone and social media activity, police were able to discover who she had been communicating with in the hours before her death. The investigation focused on Quinton Tellis, who initially claimed that their meeting had been arranged and communicated via text message, and that he barely knew her, simply asking her for a ride home. However, further analysis of their messages uncovered inconsistencies in his story, leading to his arrest for the arson murder of Jessica Chambers. Text messages showed that Quinton had sent Jessica several intimate advances on the day of the tragedy. The timeline of events began when Jessica texted Quinton at 9:02 a.m. to say she had just woken up, and Quinton replied shortly afterwards that he had also woken up. Then, at 10:09 a.m., Quinton texted Jessica saying, "I'm ready." After the text, Jessica drove to the M&M gas station and was captured on surveillance footage leaving M&M a few minutes later, presumably to pick up Tellis. They then picked up a friend of Jessica's around 10:49 a.m. Jessica dropped Quinton off at around 2:03 p.m. Quinton sent Jessica another text, this time apparently asking for some affection. It was the fourth time in 4 days that he had asked for intimacy via text. Deleted texts were also recovered, including, "I'm so horny," and "Come lay with me," but Jessica did not respond. The passenger seat in Jessica's burned car was found reclined, a common position for intimate activity in a vehicle. Prosecutors used this as evidence to suggest that the two had engaged in or attempted to engage in intimate relations on the night of the incident. Quinton was charged with arson and Jessica's murder on February 24th. Building a solid case took time. Quinton Tellis' trial began in 2017 in Batesville, Mississippi, about 50 miles south of Memphis. To ensure safety, the trial had strict security measures in place, including segregating the jury and using metal detectors to screen attendees before they entered the courtroom. Prosecutor John Champion warned the jury that they would have to see horrifying images of Jessica Chambers' burned body and hear testimony from about 35 witnesses. According to police, Jessica met Quinton on Thanksgiving in November 2014. Quinton was 7 years older than Jessica at the time and had previously attended the same high school, which she had started in October 2014. Quinton had recently been released from prison, where he had served time for burglary. In court, prosecutor John Champion presented evidence of a series of text messages exchanged between Quinton and Jessica, including one on the day of her death in which Quinton asked for intimacy. And the front seat position of Jessica's burned car was found to be adjusted downward, consistent with the text messages found. Prosecutor John Champion claimed that Quinton attempted to end her life by strangling her, then, thinking she was dead, doused her with gasoline and set her on fire. A friend of Jessica's reported that the three of them spent the day before the incident driving together in Jessica's car. On the day of the incident, Quinton eventually admitted to police that he had seen Jessica that night and had gone to a fast food restaurant with her. However, Quinton claimed that he had an alibi, saying that he was with friends at the time of the fire. However, the friends he claimed to be with did not verify his alibi. Interestingly, a store surveillance camera captured Quinton a few miles away, buying a phone card for an acquaintance in Louisiana. FBI Special Agent Dustin Blunt revealed that Quinton had deleted Jessica's contact information and their text messages from his phone shortly after her death. When asked about this action, Quinton claimed that he was not trying to hide anything. He explained that he had deleted her contact number because he did not want to keep a deceased person's phone number in his phone since it would no longer be used. Notably, records show that Quinton sent private text messages to Jessica on the day of her death. FBI agent Dustin determined that Tellis and Chambers met through a mutual friend at a gas station in their hometown of Cortland. The two spent time together frequently, often driving around. Notably, Quinton lived with his mother in a trailer near the convenience store where Jessica was last seen before her murder. Notably, his DNA was found on Jessica's keys, and cell phone records confirmed his presence at the location on the night of the murder. Quinton, who maintained his innocence throughout the trial, was told by defense attorney Darla Palmer, who advised the jury to reject the cell phone location evidence, that it did not prove Quinton and Jessica were in the same place at the same time. Quinton repeatedly proclaimed his innocence to police. Even when threatened with the death penalty, he told police that he was telling the truth and was incapable of harming anyone. His family believes that police unfairly targeted Quinton due to the highly publicized racial tensions surrounding the case. To determine whether Jessica's murder was related to other recent fires in the area, police looked into possible connections to fires in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Alabama. However, no connection was found. Despite this, the investigation has yet to produce conclusive evidence about a motive. Police said they have pursued several theories but have made little progress. Typically, identifying a suspect in a homicide is a relatively quick process, as law enforcement often relies on witnesses and informants on the street for leads. In this case, despite extensive community cooperation, DNA collection, and polygraph testing, no arrests have been made. Quinton Tellis' 2017 trial ended in a retrial. By the time the retrial began in 2018, Quinton was facing new investigations in Louisiana. He was being investigated for possible involvement in the death of student Ming Chin Xia, as well as for using stolen bank cards. In May 2019, Quinton was formally charged with second-degree murder in connection with the death of Ming Chin Xia. Sherry Flowers testified at the second trial that she picked up a hitchhiker the night of the incident. However, she did not recognize Quinton in court and admitted that she did not know the man she picked up. According to Sherry, a man flagged her down, and she stopped. She agreed to give the man a ride, describing him as a thin to medium-sized African-American man in his 20s. This description did not match Quinton, who was 26 at the time and 5 feet 9 inches. When asked why she did not contact the police in the first place, Flowers explained that she could not remember the incident and did not think it was related to the case. Prosecutors claimed that giving a hitchhiker a ride gave Quinton the opportunity to return to Jessica's car and set it on fire. However, the defense disputed the timing of the trip, arguing that the driver, Sherry, was unsure of the exact time she picked up the hitchhiker, only remembering that she had picked someone up. During the investigation, Jessica's car keys were found in a ditch 2 days after her death, near the location where the hitchhiker was picked up. The defense objected to admitting the keys into evidence. arguing that it was impossible to prove where the keys had been before they were discovered. During Quentin Tellis's retrial, the jury visited the crime scene and heard additional testimony. The second trial was extremely emotional. Witnesses broke down on the stand, and spectators wept as pictures of the young woman, Jessica Chambers' burned stomach and face, were shown. Despite a second trial, the jury was unable to reach a verdict, deadlocked for the second time in 2 years on the question of Quentin Tellis' guilt in the arson of Jessica Chambers and her car. Although the suspect has been tried twice, no verdict has been reached and the case remains officially unsolved. Online police continue to search social media for any clues that may have been overlooked. Jessica Chambers' death initially attracted significant media attention. Over time, as media interest waned, the story attracted the attention of internet police around the world. One aspect of the case that remains widely discussed is what happened to Jessica between the time she left home and her death. On the night of the incident, Jessica left home at 5 p.m. and told her mother that she was going to a nearby gas station. Surveillance footage from the gas station shows Jessica visiting the station twice. The footage shows Jessica filling up, then walking toward the store and waving to someone off camera before approaching them. The identity of the person Jessica waved to on the day of her death remains the subject of much speculation. A personal tragedy becomes a public spectacle when it evokes widespread compassion and support. The Justice for Jessica Facebook memorial page, run by Jessica's half-sister, is a prime example. The page brought together people from around the world who were moved by the tragic story of a young woman burned alive. As a result, Jessica's family and friends received an outpouring of support in the form of letters, words of encouragement, and donations. People also donated gifts and books in her name. A memorial quilt was made of bright pink patches with a zebra print, along with her photo and her birth and death dates. The quilt was particularly notable because it was made by well-wishers from all over the world. One mysterious detail about the quilt was a square stitched with the phrase "secret group," a phrase whose meaning remains unknown to this day. No one has yet been held accountable for Jessica's tragic death. Quentin Tellis, a 29-year-old man already serving time for another crime, remains a suspect, but justice for Jessica has yet to be served. Sadly, Jessica's mother, Lisa, passed away on October 29, 2021, at the age of 52, without being able to see justice for her daughter. The possibility of a third trial in Jessica's case, which involved the horrific act of being burned alive, remains uncertain. Hello again, true crime fans, we've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Michael Redlich. Danielle Redlich, born in Florida in 1976, Danielle's family moved to Cleveland, Ohio when she was a child. Her childhood was unremarkable, as she grew up to be a kind, polite, and creative person. As the eldest child, Danielle developed an appreciation for beauty and pursued higher education. She attended Valencia College, earning an Associate of Arts degree, before continuing her studies in psychology at Baldwin Wallace University. In 1996, Danielle's mother, Caitlin Aquino, remarried. However, the marriage was short-lived, lasting only 2 years. Caitlin later passed away from cancer. It turned out that she had been battling breast cancer for a long time. Before the marriage, Caitlin did not have health insurance, so she married her partner primarily to get comprehensive coverage for her medical treatment. Even with high-quality care, the cancer treatment was not successful. After Caitlin passed away, her husband, Michael Redlich, became a single father of the children and, struggling to care for them alone, sought help from Caitlin's eldest child, Danielle. Danielle was now 22 years old and, after the death of her mother, Caitlin, Danielle gave up her independent life and moved into a single household with her younger brother, younger sister, and stepfather, Michael Redlich. Danielle moved in with her stepfather and helped care for the younger siblings and worked part-time at night. During their time together, Danielle and Michael fell in love and eventually married. While Michael pursued a professional sports career, specifically recruiting players. As they spent more time together, Michael became closer to his children and felt comfortable with Danielle. In return, Danielle saw him as a reliable source of support. Danielle and Michael later became husband and wife. Despite their 20-year age difference, they interacted comfortably, not minding the age gap or social status. Over time, their relationship deepened and they gradually became closer. However, Danielle was initially hesitant to share their relationship with her family, choosing to keep it a secret for a while. Michael's life took a significant turn for the better with Danielle. Both felt rejuvenated, he was full of energy, and she was loved and protected. Thanks to his connections, Michael was able to secure her a job at an advertising agency. It paid well and everything went smoothly for the couple. However, an opportunity soon came up for Michael, who was offered the position of vice president of sales for the Memphis Grizzlies basketball team. The problem was that this job required moving to another state. He did not hesitate to ask Danielle to come with him, but she hesitated. With her studies and comfortable lifestyle, she did not want to change her life. Although she initially refused to move, their relationship remained strong and the couple continued to see each other despite the distance. Michael showed Danielle the house he had bought for them in a picturesque area along the Mississippi River. The quiet and cozy neighborhood immediately caught her attention. Danielle decides to move in with Michael and he helps her find a job in radio. Their life starts off seemingly smoothly, but troubling problems begin to arise when Michael's job changes. Michael's stressful work situation. His new position comes with increased responsibilities and pressure, as well as tension with management. As a result, Michael feels overwhelmed, stressed, and exhausted. Michael often turns to alcohol as a way to relieve stress, but this gradually becomes a daily habit. As a result, he often stays up late, comes home drunk and irritable, which puts a significant strain on the family atmosphere. Danielle tries to be supportive and understanding of her husband's difficulties, and initially, after calm conversations with her, Michael seems to calm down and promises to quit drinking. However, these promises are short-lived. Tensions escalated when Michael failed to show up for the dinner they had planned together. Not the first time this had happened, but this time they had specifically arranged to spend the evening together. Danielle was upset and said that if he couldn't make time for her, he should have warned her so she could make other plans. As she walked towards the door, she made an ill-timed joke that unintentionally upset Michael. In a shocked reaction, he slapped her across the face, causing her to stumble backwards. The slap was so hard that she became disoriented and bled. When she noticed the blood splattered on her clothes and the floor, she was so shocked that she backed away from her husband. Michael immediately apologized and began to cry. Faced with the serious injuries his wife suffered, he quickly sought help by taking her to a trusted sports doctor. The doctor examined her and gave her first aid. The doctor noticed that her front tooth was chipped and recommended that she see a dentist for further examination due to the severity of the injury. After the argument, Michael made amends by planning a special and thoughtful dinner. His efforts earned his wife, Danielle, forgiveness, and as a result, she chose not to report the incident. This decision may have been influenced by the state's strict domestic violence laws, as she sympathized with her husband and decided not to cause him any more trouble. However, this was not the first time Michael had displayed disturbing behavior. Danielle had experienced similar incidents with him when they lived in Cleveland. During this time, Michael often became jealous when Danielle's ex-boyfriend visited her. One evening, Michael made some sarcastic comments about her ex-boyfriend while they were driving home, causing Danielle to react in a similar manner. In the heat of the moment, Michael hit Danielle but quickly apologized, claiming that his actions were due to hurt feelings. Danielle chose to forgive Michael, partly blaming herself for what had happened. Over time, the incident was forgotten, as some things that happen in relationships are considered a normal part of life. In 2003, Danielle's family welcomed the birth of their daughter Jaden, marking a memorable milestone in their lives. A year later, they decided to formalize their relationship. Everything was going well, however, Michael faced challenges in his career due to a change in management, which prevented him from getting the promotion he wanted. 7 years later, the family expanded with the birth of a son named Sawyer. The parents were completely focused on raising their children. If it weren't for Michelle's job and the stress it caused, family life would have been perfect. However, Michael's job led to more frequent conflicts and he started drinking again. During an argument, he grabbed Danielle by the neck and pinned her against the wall, scaring her. This time, his wife could not stand the rude behavior, so she packed her things, took the children and moved in with relatives. Michael visited her several times, apologized and asked her to come home. After a while, their relationship was repaired. Danielle's family went through a period of instability. In the following years, her family moved several times. Michael received a job offer in California, where they lived for about 5 years, but this time it was not successful. Michael continued to struggle with personal problems and his excessive drinking. At one point, both he and his wife lost their jobs, forcing them to rely on savings for financial support. In 2014, the family faced another move, this time to Indiana. Although the move was difficult, it brought the promise of a new home and a fresh start. To make the transition smoother, Michael moved to Indiana first, while Danielle and the children remained in California. This temporary separation gave them time to sell their old home and belongings. However, the frequent moves took a toll on the family, especially the children, who had a hard time adjusting to their constantly changing surroundings. The entire process took a year, during which time the family's financial situation improved. But the couple's relationship changed. The distance and infrequent meetings took their toll, and Danielle and Michael became distant and barely communicated. When the couple finally reunited, they faced new problems. Danielle began to suspect Michael of having an affair, his attitude became cold and distant, and the previous affection faded. However, Michael confessed that his age and health were the reasons. He had been embarrassed to mention this before, fearing that he would lose his younger wife. Danielle was moved by Michael's honesty and continued to support him. The couple decided to undergo a course of hormone injections. Testosterone injections rejuvenated Michael physically and mentally. He seemed younger, regaining his former energy and vitality. However, the treatment also made him more aggressive. One evening, after watching a movie together, Michael fell asleep and Danielle went upstairs to rest. The next morning, Michael woke up, went into the bathroom where Danielle was brushing her teeth, and hit her on the head. His excuse for the outburst was that Danielle had not woken him up the night before. After the fight, she told him that she was fed up with his actions and was leaving. This angered Michael, who became violent and strangled her. Danielle was unable to defend herself and began to lose consciousness. At one point, she felt like she was going to die. After a while, Danielle regained consciousness and found her husband standing over her. He was scared and confused, begging for forgiveness. Danielle could only crawl away silently. After the incident, they continued to live together and raise their children together, but from then on, their relationship changed completely. It was clear that the time had come for them to go back. The man began to drink more and more, and tensions in the family increased, with arguments breaking out even over the smallest things. Michael's frustration increasingly turned into physical aggression, but Danielle stayed with him, although she was unhappy and increasingly resentful of her husband. She still loved him deeply, which made her reluctant to leave. The ongoing situation had a profound impact on Danielle. She became increasingly anxious and irritable, leading her to withdraw from social interactions. To distract herself, she turned to photography as a hobby. By the end of 2014, Danielle's family had finally settled into their life in Florida. Michael, exhausted by the stress of his previous job, decided to change careers. He accepted a position as Director of External and Cooperative Programs at the University of Central Florida and began teaching. Although his income was lower than what he had earned in the NBA, the job provided him with joy and stability. Initially, the family rented a house, but after a year they eventually bought their own home in the Winter Park area. Their new home was a Mediterranean-style estate with ample space. Danielle loved the attic, where she often retreated. She often slept there overnight, especially when Michael was in a rage. Michael's testosterone injections had a positive impact on his personal life with Danielle. But his behavior during these intimate moments was still harsh. Their relationship continued to be strained. As a result, Danielle turned to alcohol for comfort. While Michael worked to support the family financially, Danielle took care of the home and children. However, her increasing isolation and the couple's constant arguments eventually led to their separation in 2016. Despite their separation, Michael remained in touch with the children and continued to provide financial support. Danielle found a new job at a school and began to rebuild her life, developing friendships and regaining her independence. Meanwhile, she remained in contact with Michael, allowing him to visit the family home whenever he wanted. Unfortunately, during one of these visits, a violent argument broke out, leaving Danielle hospitalized with brain damage. Fearing the consequences for Michael, she chose not to reveal the truth about the incident. Michael mistook Danielle's silence for acceptance, but it was just a cover. In early October 2016, Michael attempted to run her over with his car, and her life was only saved because she jumped into the bushes at the right time. This prompted Danielle to file a police report, but when the police began to demand more details, she recanted her statement and left the station. The couple later reconciled and moved in together, a decision that ultimately proved fateful for both of them. At approximately 9 a.m. on January 12, 2019, Danielle called 911, reporting that her husband, Michael, had suffered a heart attack and needed assistance. When emergency crews arrived at the scene, they immediately smelled a strong chemical odor coming from the living room. A bucket of pink liquid was also found near the scene. However, the rescue team soon discovered that Michael Redlick had not died of a heart attack as his wife had suggested. Instead, they found him lying on the floor in a pool of blood, the victim of a fatal stab wound. Danielle Redlick was also found at the scene, with a cut to her wrist. Paramedics treated her before taking her to hospital for further care. As police began to examine the scene, they were certain that Michael Redlick was dead. There was no way he could have inflicted such a fatal wound on himself. Forensic analysis later confirmed that the blood found in the home was Michael's. Although someone had attempted to clean it up, the effort was not thorough. Police still found blood stains in the corners of the room and on the walls, indicating that the body had been moved from the bedroom to the living room. In addition, they discovered a large knife near the kitchen entrance and 3 smaller knives in the sink, indicating that the cleanup attempt was unsuccessful. Danielle was questioned by police shortly after a doctor confirmed that her injuries were not life-threatening. During the interview, her statements were inconsistent and contradictory. At first, she said that she thought her husband, Michael, had died of heart disease. She later changed her story, claiming that he had committed suicide after a heated argument. However, forensic experts disputed her claim, pointing out that the nature of the injuries made it unlikely that a person would have inflicted the injuries on themselves. Usually, people who try to end their lives choose a simpler and less painful method. The autopsy results showed that Michael died from excessive blood loss, and if he had received timely medical assistance, his life could have been saved. In addition, he suffered a laceration to his left eye, and toxicology tests also showed a high alcohol concentration in his body. A few days before the incident, Michael and his wife Danielle had a heated argument at home, which was witnessed by their eldest daughter Jaden. During the argument, Michael, who had been drinking, barged into the bathroom where Danielle was hiding. Jaden intervened and took the bottle of wine from her father. Danielle then left the house and only returned after Michael had fallen asleep. Although this was the first time Jaden had seen his father so angry, he later apologized for his behavior many times. Despite the incident, Jaden described his father as a loving and caring person. However, she believes that her mother often instigated conflicts that led to such arguments. The next day, Michael and his wife tried to make up, and he invited her and the children to watch a football game. Although they spent time together, Danielle seemed sad and uncommunicative. After taking the children to a friend's house for a sleepover, the couple returned home alone. That evening, Danielle went to McDonald's and returned home around 10:30 p.m. When she entered the house, she found Michael drunk. While they were having dinner, Danielle received a sudden text message from a strange man. When Michael saw this, he became aggressive, bit into a hamburger and spat at her. He then attacked Danielle, trying to strangle her. In self-defense, Danielle quickly grabbed a nearby knife and stabbed Michael in the chest. He fell to the ground and began to bleed profusely. Danielle claimed that after the incident, she called the emergency services but got the wrong number. This was later confirmed during the investigation. She said that she was so shocked that she lay down next to Michael and slept until morning. Danielle admitted that she lied during the emergency call and subsequent questioning, citing fear as her motive. Specifically, she feared that her claim of self-defense would not be believed. Her concerns were not unfounded, given her recent history. Shortly before the incident, she had been involved in a fight with friends. When police arrived at the scene, she resisted, attempting to bite one of them. She also refused to cooperate with the investigation, resulting in charges of disorderly conduct and resisting arrest. Danielle was placed on probation for approximately 1 year. An investigation revealed that the cuts on Danielle's wrists were self-inflicted due to emotional turmoil, but the injuries were superficial and not life-threatening. Therefore, her words were not to be believed. Upon further investigation, the police discovered that after learning about Michael's affair, she registered on a dating website where she socialized with men retaliated by being unfaithful. Her profile status stated that she was single and not in a relationship. Analysis of numerous messages between Michael and Danielle showed that she still loved her husband. When she learned about his affair, she felt betrayed. Danielle discovered that her husband, Michael, had intended to leave her, despite his constant expressions of remorse and desire to mend their relationship. This fact made it difficult for her to understand and accept his actions. Danielle shared that she felt heartbroken, believing that she had wasted the best years of her life on someone who did not value her. The prosecution used this information to argue that the crime was premeditated, motivated by a desire for revenge for her husband's infidelity and impending divorce. According to Danielle's neighbors, she was prone to fits of rage, and their arguments often escalated into physical fights. Michael and Danielle were viewed differently by those who knew them. Michael was described as kind and helpful, while Danielle was seen as argumentative. Evidence presented in the case showed that Danielle, acting irrationally and attacking her husband. Danielle's attorney argued that her actions were in self-defense and that she had a history of emotional and physical abuse. Relatives who often witnessed their arguments confirmed that Michael was rude and that he often mistreated and humiliated her, although he never did so in front of them. Several family members reported that Danielle was anxious and had a bad temper, which only emerged after many years of marriage. The prosecution focused on the fact that Danielle left her husband to die, possibly out of hatred and resentment towards Michael. In addition, The prosecution emphasized that Danielle would lose a significant portion of their accumulated wealth if they divorced. Furthermore, the prosecution pointed to inconsistencies in Danielle's testimony, suggesting that she was attempting to confuse the investigation and possibly tamper with evidence. Danielle was offered a plea deal during the investigation to admit to manslaughter, which would have resulted in only 10 years in prison. Despite the offer, she declined, choosing instead to maintain her innocence, although she faced life in prison if convicted of first or second-degree murder. Trial takes place on July 17, 2022. The jury returned a verdict, finding Danielle Redlick not guilty of premeditated murder, as they believed her actions were in self-defense. However, they found her guilty of tampering with evidence, which resulted in her receiving a 5-year suspended sentence. On August 5, 2022, the day the verdict was announced, Danielle Redlick was released from court. Hey detectives. Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Natalie Connolly. Natalie Connolly is a charming and beautiful girl. She has a twin sister. The twins not only look alike, they are also very close. Natalie has a cheerful and sociable personality. She always brings joy to those around her and easily makes people laugh. As a single mother, Natalie has faced many challenges, but she has tried to give her daughter Madison everything she needs. She gives her love and care to her daughter. One day, in a crowded bar, Natalie meets John Broadhurst, a charming and sophisticated man who immediately catches her attention. Despite the age difference, John's charm and wit quickly capture Natalie's heart. Soon, they exchange contact information, eager to delve deeper into their budding relationship. As they spend more time together, Natalie finds herself irresistibly attracted to John from the moment they meet, even though she initially has no idea what he does for a living or how wealthy he is. As they became closer, John revealed that he was a millionaire, a fact that became apparent through his lavish displays of affection. He showered Natalie with expensive gifts and took her to lavish dinners at high-end restaurants. His large mansion looked like a fairy tale castle, and Natalie was charmed by his gentle and polite manner. However, beneath John's charming exterior, he hides many secrets. Over time, it becomes clear that his life is more complicated than he initially lets on. Between John's engagement to his pregnant fiancée and his expectation of their second child, John has been hiding the existence of 3 more children. His relationship with Natalie is revealed to be an affair. Continues even as he deals with the breakup of his previous relationship, eventually choosing to turn his attention to Natalie. At first, John and Natalie's romance seems like a fairy tale. John quickly becomes acquainted with her daughter Madison, and she easily wins the hearts of his children. John showers Natalie with lavish gifts and seems to make every dream imaginable come true. However, when Natalie moves into John's estate in Kinver, Staffordshire, England, their passionate relationship begins to fall apart as they begin to live together and share every moment of their lives. John enjoys rough and aggressive intimacy, similar to scenes in 50 Shades of Grey, which makes Natalie feel uncomfortable. He took pleasure in inflicting pain during intimate moments, often leaving visible evidence of his aggression in the form of bruises and cuts. Despite the initial romance and luxury of the relationship, Natalie began to see a darker reality in their relationship. She felt trapped and reluctant to comply with John's demands. Fearing abandonment, like his pregnant ex-fiancée, and fearing a return to her previous lonely life, she chose to stay and not leave. Natalie turns to her sister and mother for support, sharing with them the physical and emotional pain she suffered at the hands of John during their intense and often violent sexual encounters. Although John is adept at being a lover, Natalie cannot ignore the pain he frequently causes her. She struggles to reconcile her conflicting emotions, feeling caught between the pleasure she experiences with him and the hurt he causes her. The chaos leaves Natalie feeling stuck, unsure how to reconcile. As Natalie's dissatisfaction grew, she and John began to drift apart, both seeking new relationships outside of their marriage. John sought relationships with other women and Natalie texted other men. When John discovers Natalie chatting with other men, he becomes extremely angry. Although he himself had relationships with other women, he still felt uncomfortable with Natalie having relationships with other men. However, he hid his discomfort and instead suggested Natalie go out and eat together. On December 18, 2016, after a fun day of going out and having dinner at a favorite restaurant, John asked the driver to take them home. But behind the normal appearance, John had dark intentions. Natalie had drunk a lot of alcohol during dinner that night. When she returned home, she was disoriented, staggered out of the car, and unfortunately left her phone behind. When she entered the house, John had darker plans. After the driver returned and handed Natalie the phone, she endured John's brutal attacks. He violently attacked her, punching, kicking, stomping, and throwing bleach at her face and genitals. To add to her pain, he used a bottle of carpet cleaner as a weapon, spraying it on her from a hose. After completing his vicious attack, John heartlessly left Natalie at the bottom of the stairs, badly injured and bleeding profusely. She lay in a pool of blood as John retreated to his bed. When he awoke several hours later, he found Natalie dead, having suffered numerous horrific injuries. John's subsequent actions, including his unconvincing performance during the emergency call, expose his twisted mentality as he nonchalantly announces Natalie's situation to the rescue team. As the paramedics sadly carried Natalie's body into the ambulance, John stood there, emotionless, silently observing the tragic consequences of his actions. After Natalie was declared dead, he was arrested by the police. In an attempt to explain what had happened, John claimed that things had gone too far during rough sex. He insisted that Natalie had consented to everything they did, and that she had even requested the violent and brutal acts that led to her death. According to John's disturbing account, Natalie had wanted to be hurt, abused, and had a foreign object inserted into her body. He claimed that despite the blood and pain, she had told him that she was fine and wanted more, and that he was trying to blame her for her tragic death. John attempted to avoid responsibility by claiming that Natalie had willingly engaged in rough sex many times before without any problems. When asked why he had left her lying at the bottom of the stairs partially clothed, he gave an excuse, that the house was always warm. So he did not need to provide a blanket. John showed no remorse or apology, instead placing the blame squarely on Natalie. Surprisingly, his attempt at blame-shifting worked, much to the anger of many. Although he was convicted of manslaughter, he was given a relatively short sentence of 3 years and 8 months, and serving only 22 months before being released. Today, John Broadhurst walks among us, a stark reminder of the miscarriages of justice and the ongoing pain suffered by Natalie and her loved ones. The Natalie Connolly case has been widely criticized and controversial. Motivated Fiona McKenzie to launch the "We Can't Agree with This" movement in December 2018. McKenzie's initiative serves two purposes: to spark conversations about the widespread problem of sexual assault and to advocate for the removal of the rough sex defense. In Fiona's view, she believes that this defense justifies violence in intimate relationships and reinforces harmful stereotypes. However, McKenzie was surprised to discover that some individuals, despite disagreeing with the court's decision, accepted it. They believed that it was just an accident, not a sign of intentional homicide. Unfortunately, this way of thinking often leads to victim blaming, unfairly holding them responsible for the risks of their actions. The gross sexual homicide defense was explicitly banned with the passing of the Domestic Abuse Bill by Parliament on July 6, 2020. Following royal assent on April 29, 2021, the bill banned the gross sexual homicide defense, a significant step in tackling domestic violence. offenders can no longer use this defense to justify their actions. Natalie's death has left a huge void in the lives of her family and friends, who are in shock and deeply saddened by her loss. Since her death, the community has come together to raise awareness of domestic violence and to help survivors heal and recover. Their kindness and solidarity has brought hope in the wake of a terrible tragedy. Although Natalie's life has ended, her memory will always remain with those who knew and loved her. Her story will inspire us to fight against domestic violence and help those in need. Hey detectives! Welcome back. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Neil Entwistle. Neil Entwistle was born on September 18, 1978 in Worksop, Nottinghamshire, England. His parents, Clifford and Yvonne Entwistle, raised him and his younger brother Russell in a small house. His father, Clifford, worked as a coal miner before becoming a labor consultant, and his mother, Yvonne, worked as a cook in the school canteen. After finishing high school, Neil attended York University to study electrical engineering and business management. While at the university, he met Rachel Souza, an American student studying abroad. From Kingston, Massachusetts. Rachel attended Silver Lake Regional High School and later transferred to Holy Cross College in Worcester. During her year at York University, she joined the rowing team, where she met Neil. Described as reserved and unsociable, Neil impressed his friends with his calm demeanor. Rachel, on the other hand, was outgoing, and her American background added to her charm. As a result, she was popular while on the rowing team. Neil and Rachel spent more time together, and they became closer. Neil and Rachel found themselves attracted to each other. Neil worked at a defense and security technology company in Malvern, Worcestershire. Meanwhile, Rachel pursued a career in education. After completing her studies in 2002, she became an English drama and theater teacher at St. Augustine's Catholic High School in Redditch. Neil shared a post on Friends Reunited in June 2003, joking that his job was making bombs and other things for a living. He also expressed his happiness about his upcoming wedding to Rachel, whom he called the most wonderful woman in the world. They met through sailing and formed a deep bond. Although he said he felt a little unhappy living south of the border in Birmingham, he was excited about his future with Rachel. In August 2003, the couple married in 2 ceremonies, one in Plymouth, UK and one in Massachusetts, USA. Following the ceremony in the US, they had a reception in the UK. Neil created a family website where he shares updates about their life in Worcester. The couple's daughter, Lillian Rose, was born in April 2005, leading to their decision to move to the US. They initially lived with Rachel's mother, Priscilla Matarazzo, and stepfather, Joseph, in Carver, Massachusetts, before moving to their own home in Hopkinton on January 12, 2006. Their new home, located on a quiet cul-de-sac with only 8 neighbors, offers a quiet setting just a short walk from the nearest major city. The 5-bedroom home rents for $1,500 a month, which is quite expensive. Neil, a computer programmer and IT professional, is having trouble finding work, which is causing financial stress and debt. To ease his financial burden, Neil turns to selling PC parts on eBay. However, his business is affected by customer complaints about undelivered orders, which brings in eBay's fraud investigators. During the proceedings, it is discovered that Neil has been using multiple accounts under different names. During this time, Neil runs a website called millionmaker.co.uk. The site promoted a get-rich-quick scheme targeting those in the adult entertainment industry, offering 24/7 support. The site promised a guaranteed monthly profit of $6,000 within the first 6 months. However, the site was eventually shut down. At the same time, Neil was using online platforms to find sexual partners. He visited sites such as Adult Friend Finder, Half Price Escorts, Nightlife, and Hot Local Euro Escorts for this purpose. Neil created a profile on Adult Friend Finder and emailed several women, saying he was looking for sexual partners. Investigators found incriminating content on his laptop, including a profile in which he mentioned wanting to meet American women of various ages to confirm rumors about their sexual prowess. His profile suggested a straightforward and mutually beneficial approach to meeting like-minded people. During his trial, Neil revealed that he had searched online for blondes, suggesting that he was still interested in such services. His online searches, most recently on January 18, 2006, included terms such as Worcester Escort Services and Worcester Escorts on Google. However, Neil's actions were not simply a search for escorts and other women. Neil conducted an alarming array of online searches. He searched for terms such as knife to the throat, kill, and how to kill with a knife. These searches were interspersed with more conventional searches for employment opportunities, travel, and ways to make quick money. Additionally, during this time, Neil traveled to Carver to visit his father-in-law, Joe Matarazzo. Joe was a member of the Old Colony Sporting Club in Carver. After being taught how to shoot by Joe, Neil planned to steal a gun from Joe's collection at their home in Carver, Massachusetts. He went to his parents-in-law's home, retrieved the weapon from a storage location in the home, and drove back to Hopkinton with the gun in hand. Upon returning home, he discreetly hid the gun, waiting for the opportunity to commit a tragic act of violence against his family, before ending his own life. On January 20, 2006, Neil entered the bedroom where his wife Rachel and 9-month-old daughter Lillian were sleeping. He shot Rachel, 27, in the head, then shot Lillian, who was lying next to her. The bullet passed through Lillian's body and into Rachel's left chest. That same day, while his wife's family was still at work, he returned to Carver, returning the weapon without cleaning it. After leaving Carver, Neil went to Logan Airport in Boston. That evening, January 20, 2006, he withdrew a total of $800 from an ATM in 2 transactions. However, a third attempt to withdraw an additional $420 was rejected. The next day, Saturday, January 21, 2006, Neil purchased a one-way ticket to London without luggage. At around 5 p.m., he boarded a British Airways flight, which departed from Boston at 8:15 p.m. That Saturday evening, Neil had invited some neighbors over for dinner. Joanna Gatley and her sister Maureen arrived at around 7 p.m. and found the house locked, but the lights were still on inside. Worried, they tried to call Rachel's mother, but were unable to reach her. Panicking, they decided to call 911 for assistance. The police quickly arrived at Neil's house at around 8:30 p.m. Upon entering the house, Sergeant Michael Sutton observed the scene, noticing inside the bedroom was a large, unmade bed with all the clothes piled in the middle of the bed. Except for the unmade bed, everything else in the house appeared to be in order. After completing the search, the police locked the house and left to continue patrolling. Although the police continued to search, Joanna and Maureen were still extremely worried about Rachel's family. They decided to spend the night in the car, waiting for the family to return. Despite the cold, they made several trips to the gas station bathroom during the night, anxiously waiting for any news. The next morning, Sunday, the sisters gained access to the house using the garage door code they had obtained from a neighbor the night before. When they entered the house, they found evidence that the family had just finished eating, with dishes and leftovers in the kitchen. The bathtub was still full of water, indicating that the parents had just bathed their newborn daughter. They went into the master bedroom, then to Lillian's bathroom, where classical music was playing, and finally to the living room. After Rachel's mother and stepfather arrived, they assessed the situation together and decided to report the family missing to the Hopkinton Police Department. Sergeant Michael returned to the house for a second search. This time, when he entered the basement, he noticed a strong, unpleasant odor that had not been there the day before. He followed the smell through the house until he reached the master bedroom. There, he found the bodies of Rachel and Lillian on the unmade bed, covered in clothes. Rachel's arms were stretched out across Lillian's chest, and her legs were drawn up beside her daughter. Both were wearing pajamas. An autopsy later revealed that Rachel had been shot in the head and Lillian in the torso. Further investigation found Rachel's DNA on the barrel of the gun and Neil's DNA on the stock. Neil Entwistle, 27, was initially listed as a missing person. Michael Fabry, Assistant District Attorney for Middlesex County, stated that the main priority on the first night was to find Neil as his location and condition were unknown, raising concerns for his safety. About 36 hours after returning to England, Neil visited his parents, Clifford and Yvonne. He had driven and spent the previous night at a hotel. During the visit, he told his parents that he had found the bodies of his wife and daughter. On Monday, January 23, 2006, Neil had a 2-hour telephone conversation with State Police Constable Robert Manning of the Hopkinton Police Department. The conversation was recorded and later played back in full during the court proceedings. Neil explained that after finding the bodies, he became extremely frightened and quickly went to his family. He told police that he had covered the bodies with sheets and then thought of the knives in the house. He picked up a large knife and stabbed himself, but was too afraid of the pain to use it. Neil appeared confused as to why he did not call an ambulance. Neil could not bring himself to use a knife to harm himself. He told police that he then drove the family car to his father-in-law Joe Matarazzo's house to retrieve a .22 LR revolver. However, he found the house locked. Rather than explore other options, Neil decided to fly back to England to stay with his parents. On January 26, 2006, U.S. police arrived in the UK to question Neil. The following day, January 27, after speaking to a lawyer at his parents' home, Neil refused to meet with U.S. police at the U.S. Embassy in London. Rachel and her daughter Lillian were buried at Evergreen Cemetery in Kingston, Massachusetts, under the surname Souza. They were buried together in a coffin. About 500 people attended the funeral, but Neil was absent. His name was not mentioned at the service and is not inscribed on their joint headstone. Instead, Neil sent a bouquet of flowers consisting of an orange rose and a white lily with a note attached to a ribbon. The note read, "My orange roses and lilies forever," and was signed Sakoko. Upon his return to England, Neil appeared to have returned to his usual routine. In February 2006, despite the constant media attention outside his parents' home in Waltham, he attended a dinner in Notting Hill with his old crew from York University. About a week after Rachel and Lillian's funerals, he also went to the movies. On February 8, 2006, the Middlesex District Attorney's Office issued a warrant for Neil's arrest. The following day, Neil was arrested by London's Metropolitan Police at Royal Oak Station as he prepared to board a train. At the time of his arrest, Neil had a notebook in which he planned to sell his story to the highest bidder. The notebook also included affectionate notes about his orange rose and a person named Lily. Neil referred to his wife as "my dearest and most beloved friend" in the notebook. He also wrote 2 letters to the editor sharing his story and had contacted a close friend about his plans. In one of the letters, Neil asked about the amount of money he might receive for sharing his entire story exclusively. Neil chose not to contest the extradition order. On February 15, he was returned to the United States and appeared in Framingham County Court. The court ordered him held without bail at the Middlesex County Jail in Cambridge, Massachusetts. On March 28, 2006, Neil was formally charged with 2 counts of murder, as well as illegal possession of a firearm and ammunition. He pleaded not guilty to these charges. In December 2006, Nearly a year after the tragic incident, Middlesex County Jail police found letters Neil had written to his parents and attorney. The letters revealed his struggles with depression and hinted that he may have been thinking about ending his life. As a result, he was temporarily transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for a psychiatric evaluation before being returned to Middlesex County Jail. Forensic psychiatrist Christopher Cordless believed that Neil's behavior was the result of Asperger's syndrome, a view also shared by Dr. David Holmes. After several delays, jury selection for the trial in Middlesex Superior Court began in June 2008. Concerns arose over the high-profile nature of the case and whether Neil would receive a fair trial. The trial officially began on June 2, 2008, in Wrentham, Massachusetts. Elliot Weinstein led Neil's defense team. During the trial, Weinstein attempted to block the prosecution from using DNA evidence, but was unsuccessful. He also attempted to exclude other evidence found in the family home because the police did not have a warrant, but this effort was also unsuccessful. Neil chose not to call any witnesses or testify in his own defense. Those who attended the trial noted that Neil showed little emotion throughout the trial. On June 25, 2008, Neil Entwistle was convicted of first-degree murder, as well as possession of a firearm and ammunition without a license. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, Neil told family and friends in court not to worry, saying, "I'll be fine." He was initially sent to the Sousa Baranowski Correctional Center. However, in August 2008, Neil shaved his head, thinking it would protect him from a white supremacist gang in prison. But instead of protecting him, the gang said they would kill him and viewed his actions as a futile attempt to gain their favor. As a result, Neil was transferred to protective custody for his own safety. Then, in December, Neil was transferred to the Old Colony Correctional Center, a medium-security prison in Bridgewater, Massachusetts. The transfer was made for his own safety due to threats against his life, according to the Department of Corrections. The deaths of Rachel and her infant daughter had a profound impact on their family and friends. In the wake of the loss, the community rallied to offer support and comfort to her grieving family. The story of Neil Entwistle and Rachel Sousa is a heartbreaking reminder that even people who appear to have perfect lives can be hiding difficulties. Hopefully, the stories of Rachel and her daughter will help us to stay vigilant and to cherish the time we have with our loved ones. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of the Rahman family. Jean-Claude Rahman was born on February 11, 1954, in Lille, France, and grew up in Clairvaux in the Jura region. He completed his baccalaureate in 1971. He began his studies at the University of Lyon but lasted only one semester before dropping out. He then went to medical school and eventually married a woman named Florence Cray. Florence Cray was born on March 6, 1956, and studied at the University of Lyon to become a doctor. There, she met Jean-Claude Rahman, a distant relative of her family. Initially, Jean-Claude did not attract Florence's attention, and they did not know each other very well, nor did they spend much time together. However, over time, through mutual friends and study sessions, they began to spend more time together. Jean-Claude immediately fell in love with Florence and tried to win her over. However, Florence saw him as just an ordinary guy, nothing special, and not very articulate. She had envisioned herself marrying a typical doctor, smart, attractive, and charming. After failing her second exam, she switched from medicine to pharmacy. Together with Jean-Claude, they continued to support each other in their studies and exams until they graduated in the next decade. In 1980, Florence and Jean-Claude Rahman got married. 6 years later, they had their first child, Caroline. 2 years after Caroline was born, their son, Antoine, was born. Florence lived a normal life as a wife and mother. She worked in local pharmacies to support her family, while her husband, Jean-Claude, worked at the World Health Organization in Geneva, a short distance from their home in France. After Christmas 1992, Florence went out and traveled around France for a few days. During that time, their children, Caroline and Antoine, were at school, while Jean-Claude was working in Geneva. Jean-Claude Ramin kept his work life private, sharing very little information with his family and friends. Florence believed that her husband was involved in important and respected medical research. He maintained a clear boundary between his work and personal life, to the point that Florence could never call his office phone, as Jean-Claude insisted on not being disturbed during work hours. If Florence needed to contact him urgently, she could send him a text message, and he would call her back as soon as possible. Friends often asked about Jean-Claude's role at the WHO, wanting to know exactly what he did there. Florence usually dodged the question by giggling and admitting that she was not sure either. Sometimes, she joked that maybe one day she would find out her husband was a secret agent. Every year at Christmas, the WHO holds an office Christmas tree decoration event, allowing employees to bring their families to participate. In Christmas 1992, Florence learned about the event, but her husband never mentioned it to her. Florence felt anxious and insecure about his situation. From an acquaintance revealing that her husband was not listed in the WHO directory to discovering that her family was not mentioned at his workplace after more than a decade of service, these things may have affected Florence's mental state. The extent to which these revelations impacted Florence remains unclear, as it is not known whether she confronted her husband about the matter. According to Florence's brother, who went on holiday with the family, Florence appeared to fall into a deep depression during those days. During this time, family conversations became only speculative. As the new year of 1993 approached, Florence and Jean-Claude Ramin went shopping together a few days later, and Florence insisted that Jean-Claude buy a new suit, which she eventually convinced him to do. On that same day, after leaving from his wife, Jean-Claude went to a pharmacy and placed an order for January 9th. On the evening of January 5th, he withdrew 2,000 francs from two different ATMs. Before heading to a gun store, Jean-Claude gave 500 francs to a homeless person he met. After leaving the store, he took several items with him, including a pepper spray canister, a box of bullets, a silencer for a .22 caliber rifle, and a stun gun. The night passed peacefully upon his return home. On January 11th, at 4 a.m., an emergency call was made to the fire department, reporting that a fire was raging in the house. In the early hours of the morning, garbage collectors discovered the house on fire and quickly alerted the fire brigade. As the firefighters arrived and began extinguishing the flames, they noticed movement in an upstairs bedroom window, suggesting that someone inside needed help. Paramedics were called, and Jean-Claude Ramin, who had been trapped in his residence, was rescued. When he was brought out, he appeared to be in a state of shock and unresponsive to the paramedics. Jean-Claude was then taken to the hospital, where he eventually fell into a coma. Within a short time, the fire was extinguished, allowing the fire brigade to enter. Jean-Claude's family friend Dr. Luc Ladmiral was called to the scene and witnessed the horrific sight as stretchers carried the charred bodies of Antoine, Caroline, and Florence away from the scene. When a fire causes death in a family, the police conduct an investigation to clarify the details of the incident. This process aims to provide closure to the grieving families and eliminate the possibility of any criminal activity. Consequently, after the tragic fire, law enforcement agencies launched an investigation due to the significant loss suffered by the family of a prominent doctor. During the autopsy of Florence's body, the medical team discovered evidence of blunt force trauma to the back of the skull. This raised suspicion and curiosity, especially after it was determined that Florence's death was caused by blunt force trauma rather than by the fire. The autopsy results of the children revealed another heart-wrenching truth. Contrary to initial assumptions, Caroline and Antoine did not die in the fire, rather, they had died earlier from gunshot wounds. This suggests that events occurred before the house burned down. Following the suspicious circumstances surrounding the deaths of Florence and her children, law enforcement launched an investigation. However, with Jean-Claude Roman in a coma and unable to provide any information, investigators faced challenges pursuing alternative leads, leaving the Rome home as the crime scene. Officials contacted the victim's family, acquaintances, and neighbors to gather more information about the events surrounding the case. Dr. Luc Ladmiral, who witnessed the victims being taken away from the scene, was also contacted as part of the investigation. Amidst the uncertainty, Luc struggles to make sense of the situation. When questioned by investigators about family enemies, Luc is unable to identify anyone. However, he is summoned for questioning a few days later. Luc finds himself under police investigation regarding his family's connections and recent events that may have caused the fire. Despite extensive questioning, the conclusion remains the same: the family has a good reputation, and no significant incidents occurred prior to the tragedy. Then attention turns to Jean-Claude, who reveals a shocking piece of information: he has never been employed by the World Health Organization, nor has he ever lectured at the University of Dijon. In fact, he is not a qualified doctor, let alone employed in any medical capacity. Luc is initially skeptical, but as he recalls their shared school experience, his suspicions grow. This leads to a startling realization. He tells the authorities about an incident that occurred during his sophomore year when he noticed Jean-Claude absent from an exam. The change in Jean-Claude's usual behavior worries Luc. When he visits Jean-Claude at home, he observes signs of poor health, including clammy skin, a pale complexion, and dark circles under his eyes. Jean-Claude claims he is being treated for lymphoma, a manageable form of cancer, but the condition is exacerbated by stress related to the exam. At Jean-Claude's request, Luc pledges to keep this information confidential, especially from Florence. Investigators determine that Luc has no further details. They therefore wait for the results of the forensic examination of the burnt house, hoping to gather more information for the investigation. Investigators note unusual details in the house. They find that all the doors are locked from the inside, indicating that no one had illegally entered. Initially, the hypothesis of an accidental fire is put forward, but this changes when the condition of the bodies is revealed. The new findings point to a more sinister scenario, necessitating an interview with Jean-Claude. While he remains unconscious for weeks, the authorities focus on him as the main suspect, initiating a full investigation. Although Jean-Claude does not have a medical degree, his long studies at the university raise suspicions. When the educational institution is contacted, they confirm that he had been studying for 12 years. Although he successfully completed the first-year exam, he failed the second-year exam. Taking advantage of the lack of admission restrictions, Jean-Claude repeatedly re-enrolled in the second year throughout his studies. Despite devoting much time and effort to studying, attending lectures, and reviewing medical texts, he still cannot pass the second exam, which is puzzling. It is possible that staying up late and missing the exam was a significant factor. He was given the opportunity to retake the exam several months later, but he did not take it. As investigators continue to probe the deaths of Florence and the children, they face another horrifying discovery. Jean-Claude's uncle, wanting to break the bad news to Jean-Claude's parents, goes to their home only to be met with an unusual silence. Upon entering, he discovers the bodies of Jean-Claude's parents, both victims of gunshot wounds. The investigation confirms that Jean-Claude's parents had been shot with the same type of gun used to kill Antoine and Caroline. Their deaths occur close together, suggesting that the events are related. After the tragedies are made public, the mystery deepens. The police receive a call from a woman who does not want to reveal her identity or any personal information and is hesitant to participate in the investigation. However, she provides one crucial piece of information: she has become romantically involved with Jean-Claude after meeting him in Paris. She also claims that he is not a researcher at the World Health Organization. He had deceived her into believing that he was an influential expert. The woman was tricked into believing that Jean-Claude was actively involved in and funding important research projects. He also described banks in Geneva as very profitable. Using his POS. He deceived her into investing money in a Swiss bank with an 18% interest rate, which turned out to be a trap. Employing persuasive techniques, Jean-Claude convinced his girlfriend to invest her money. She was initially hesitant, but they eventually reached an agreement. She would provide him with 990,000 francs to invest, hoping to receive a return in 3 months. As the payment deadline approached in early January, the woman reminded Jean-Claude of their agreement, stressing that she needed the money to support herself and her family. After some negotiation, they arranged to meet for dinner. He invited her to dinner with a prominent political figure, intending to generate interest and hopefully recover her investment. On the agreed date, he picked her up in Paris to begin the trip they had been anticipating. As night fell, Jean-Claude and the woman got lost. Suddenly, he stopped the car and attacked her inside. He used tear gas, stun guns, and cables against her. However, she fought fiercely for her life and managed to escape from the car. He chased her but agreed to stop when he begged for mercy. It seemed he realized his plan had failed and pleaded for forgiveness. The excuse he gave the woman was one that had become familiar to investigators. He claimed that his lymphoma was flaring up, causing him to behave erratically and unlike himself. The woman agreed to keep quiet about the incident in exchange for Jean-Claude bringing her home safely. Investigators started to piece together a better understanding of him. He was a pathological liar, a manipulator, and a con man. The question that haunted the detectives was he also a killer? After waking from his coma, Jean-Claude was quickly approached by investigators to discuss their remaining suspicions. They expected him to confess, but he chose to remain silent. He sat in his hospital bed, staring blankly into space, unresponsive when asked about the events of January 9th, the origin of the fire, the shooting of Antoine and Caroline, the serious injuries his wife suffered, and the discovery of his parents' deaths. He was subjected to repeated interrogations, but despite relentless questioning, he refused to reveal anything. It was only when investigators informed him that they knew the truth, that he was not a doctor and was unemployed, that he changed. What prompted him to finally break his silence remains unclear, but he eventually began to talk. According to him, on the night of January 9th, Jean-Claude and Florence were having a typical evening at home. After putting their children to bed, they retired to their bedroom. According to his recollection, the entire situation came to a sudden end when he recalled the horrific scene of finding his wife sprawled on the bed, surrounded by blood and holding a blood-stained rolling pin. It is unclear what happened. Perhaps there was an argument, but Jean-Claude went to bed with his wife and woke up the next morning to prepare breakfast for the children. Caroline and Antoine sat on the couch, watching cartoons that their father had chosen. He served each of them a bowl of cereal before joining them to watch TV. When the children asked about their mother's absence, he told them that she was not feeling well and needed more rest. That morning, Jean-Claude noticed that Caroline was feeling ill and was concerned about her health. He guided Caroline to the bedroom upstairs. Caroline then lay face down on the bed with a pillow over her head, but the reason for this was not explained. Jean-Claude was unable to provide a clear explanation to investigators regarding the chain of events. However, he speculated that the incident may have been related to a game he had been playing with his daughter. He then used a .22 caliber rifle fitted with a silencer to fatally shoot his 7-year-old daughter in the back of the head. Antoine similarly met a tragic end. After the incident, his memory became hazy. The evidence presented at trial showed that he left home, bought a newspaper, and went about his daily activities, appearing normal to people. He then returned home and watched television. Although Jean-Claude denied these details at trial, one event was certain: he received an invitation from his parents to have lunch on the day of the incident. He accepted the invitation, left his quiet abode to drive to his parents' house, and joined them for lunch. He then tricked his father into going upstairs under the pretext of checking a faulty boiler. Despite his father's old age, he still attempted to perform the requested inspection but was unexpectedly shot in the back by his own son. When he returned to his mother's place, he did not make up any excuses this time. His mother became the only victim, shot by him when he faced her. The motive behind these actions remains unclear. Before leaving, he also killed the family dog. When asked about this at trial, it was the only time he showed remorse. Overcome with emotion, he broke down in tears and revealed that the dog had been very much loved by his children, bringing back memories of Caroline. At that point, Jean-Claude decided to return home and commit suicide. However, his plan did not go as intended. He had previously had a mistress who had provided him with 990,000 francs with the promise of an investment scheme, which was how Jean-Claude supported himself. He told many people, including his relatives and Florence's family, stories of the profits from these investments. People who trusted he entrusted him with managing their finances. This allowed he to gradually accumulate a large sum of money. He then transferred the money to private bank accounts in Geneva, avoiding the scrutiny of tax authorities and others. He had carefully managed the family finances, ensuring that his wife, Florence, had no knowledge of his fraudulent activities. However, the time had come to face the consequences of what he had done. As expected, people began to demand that he return our money along with the promised profits. Unfortunately, this was an obligation he could not fulfill. All of his income was immediately used to meet current needs, leaving him with virtually no savings, despite having accumulated over 2 million francs over the years. It was time for him to come clean and share the truth with Florence and the others who had entrusted him with their money. He found that he could no longer maintain this lies, and the mounting pressure made him feel trapped with no clear way out. Like many others, he convinced himself that by ending the lives of his loved ones, he would save his family from the consequences of his wrongdoings. He then planned to commit suicide to avoid facing the harsh reality. He believed that he could continue lying forever and never thought that he would be discovered or that he would have to confess. He kept coming up with other lies to maintain the pattern throughout his life. On June 23, 1996, the trial of Jean-Claude began. During the trial, he sat silently, avoiding eye contact and keeping his head down, with police on either side. On July 2, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole for 22 years for the murder of his wife, children, and parents. In 2019, Jean-Claude Roman applied for release from prison to live in a monastery. During his incarceration, he reportedly became a devout Christian, accepted his mistakes, and vowed to spend the rest of his life repenting as punishment. The judge accepted his plea, citing his good behavior as a factor worth considering. However, it is unfortunate that all the victims suffered at the hands of this deceitful, manipulative, and cruel man. As we reflect on this heartbreaking event, We cannot help but feel compassion for those whose lives were taken so suddenly and for the families and friends who suffered their loss.